Could also be staged. This paracetamol that you're showing me isn't government paracetamol. This is private paracetamol.
We've heard this ourselves. When parents come in, sometimes nurses say we don't even have paracetamol. It's finished. Go and get it yourself.
This footage is also staged.
Absolutely not. In the example you saw, there were volunteers.
They're completely banned. At this time, there is no volunteer in the hospital.
Then why were they here?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Either your footage is staged, or this footage is from the time of the MS before me.
When I say that we can see nurses not wearing sterile gloves and putting their hands into the discard boxes, thereby putting themselves at risk, he simply says gloves are provided, but he can't forcibly grab the nurses and make them wear them.
The infection preventions are followed at THQ Hospital Tonsa.
But I just showed you they are not being followed.
I don't agree with that.
This isn't Pakistan's first outbreak of HIV amongst children. While we were filming in Thosa, we heard about another HIV outbreak, this time in Pakistan's largest city, Karachi, in the south of the country. Again, it was centred around a specific hospital with children being infected. Experts like Dr. Fatima Mir say the lack of early screening and the reuse of equipment within clinics is what sparks these outbreaks.
In the
same healthcare facility, high-risk children are coming in, infected children and uninfected children are coming in, okay? They are all receiving injections. The same injection apparatus is being used for infected, uninfected, at risk and not at risk. And because of this, suddenly the low-risk individual has become a high-risk individual. Going to the health provider has become a risk factor. There's a chance you might leave there with HIV or hepatitis B or hep C.
Dr. Mir says to prevent further outbreaks, Pakistani healthcare must reduce its dependence on injections. That means more education, training and supervision. For those who have contracted HIV, the stigma in today's Pakistan can make life very tough, especially for children, like Asma, as her uncle explains.
Not only does the family know about her illness, the neighbours also know, because often they don't let their children play with asthma. There is so much fear, they don't even let their children touch asthma.
Harmed in the very place trusted to keep them safe, children like Asma will face stigma and need treatment for life.
Then she asks her mother, "What is wrong with me?" The poor girl says, "Children don't play with me. They don't even walk with me."
Pakistan now faces repeated outbreaks. 10-year-old Asma lives with HIV, but she still has hopes and dreams. She tells me she works hard at school. And she says, when I grow up, I want to become a doctor. That's Assignment from Pakistan. I'm Ghazal Abbasi. The producer was John Murphy.
That was Assignment from the BBC. I'm Saroja Coelho, and
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Manitoba YouTube page. I'm Corey Funk, in for Marcy Marcusa. Hope you had yourselves a lovely spring yesterday, because winter is back in full force, pretty much right across the province today. So we're going to be plugging you into that. We do have a special weather stand, which I will get to shortly here. But first, let's say hello to the team. Abiyemi is behind the glass, keeping an eye on your weather as well. So he'll be a busy guy today as well. Sierra Sanders is your studio director and keeping an eye on your commute. And Darren Morash is our CBC YouTube producer. Let's also say hello to Heather Wells this morning, who has a look at your news headlines.
Good morning. Well, City of Winnipeg staff are advising against moving ahead with a managed encampment for people experiencing homelessness. A new report says setting up a supervised site would require significant resources and could take away from other efforts already underway. But Marion Willis at St. Boniface Street Links says politicians are not true experts and should be looking to those who are working in the trenches. A 45-year-old woman faces an assault charge after a nurse was punched at the hospital in the paw. RCMP were called to St. Anthony's General Hospital Sunday. Police say the nurse suffered minor injuries. Darlene Jackson at the Manitoba Nurses Union says violence in healthcare is getting more common, but even more frightening, she says, is that it's almost accepted now. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 6:30.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
That is Heather Wells at our CBC News Desk. Well, as mentioned, there is a special weather statement in effect for pretty much the entirety of southern Manitoba this morning. There is a late season winter storm that is starting to make its way through the province. It's going to start in the west, to work its way east, as it usually does. We can expect some snow and even potentially some freezing rain that could impact your highway commute this morning. So we're going to be keeping an eye on that. By the end of the system, there could be about 4 to 8 centimeters, in most of the province, but around the Parkland region, could see as much as 15 centimeters of snow. So we'll be keeping an eye on that throughout the morning. It is right now -5 actually right now in Winnipeg. Stay tuned, lots to come. Record profits for the bombers. We're also going to talk about the peace negotiations going on between U.S. and Iran. It's coming up after World Report.
Canada Reads 2026. 5 perceptive panelists, 5 blockbuster books, 4 days of smart and sassy deliberation and debate. But there can only be one winner. Ali Hassan hosts Canada's favorite book battle, Canada Reads 2026. One book to build bridges. All this week on radio, TV, the Listen app, and on CBC Jam. For more, go to cbcbooks.ca.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm John Northcott. We begin in the Middle East, where high-stakes diplomacy is causing confusion this morning. U.S. President Donald Trump says the leaders of Israel and Lebanon will speak today, which would be their first conversation in over 30 years. But the Lebanese government says it knows nothing about it. This comes as Pakistan plays mediator for separate talks between the U.S. and Iran. The CBC's Tom Perry is following the latest for us from Jerusalem. Tom, Trump is talking up an historic phone call today, but is Lebanon actually on board?
Well, what we heard last night from the U.S. president, he posted a message on Truth Social. He said that we're trying to get a little breathing room, he wrote, between Israel and Lebanon. It's been a long time since the two leaders have spoken, like 34 years, he wrote, and it will happen tomorrow. So that means today. So today, though, we did hear from an official in the office of Lebanon's president who said they're unaware of any upcoming contacts between Lebanon and Israel. So that cast doubt on the U.S. president's claim. That said, Israel's army radio has been quoting a member of Benjamin Netanyahu's security cabinet saying the Israeli prime minister will speak to the Lebanese president. So I guess we'll see. Lebanese and Israeli officials did meet this week in Washington, D.C. That was all part of this U.S.-backed effort to end the fighting between Israel and Hezbollah. Israeli media has reported that Israel's government has been considering a one-week ceasefire, but right now nothing is settled. And so the Israeli campaign against Hezbollah continues.
At the same time, Tom, Pakistan says there is progress on talks between Washington and Tehran. But how much of a factor is it whether a Lebanon ceasefire actually happens?
Well, it is a factor, actually. And this, of course, would be about extending the 2-week ceasefire currently in place between the U.S. and Iran and working toward ending this conflict. We've seen a number of alerts move this morning out of Islamabad. Pakistan, of course, has been working to broker a deal between the U.S. and Iran. Today, we heard a number of statements from Pakistan's foreign ministry saying the U.S. and Iran are willing to hold talks, that the process is continuing, that no dates or venue for talks have been determined, that the nuclear issue, so presumably Iran's nuclear program, is one of the items being discussed, and that peace in Lebanon, where Israel is carrying out this military campaign, is essential for peace talks between the U.S. and Iran. Now, what does any of that mean? It's hard to say. Potentially some hopeful signs, but right now, as in Lebanon, nothing really concrete.
Tom, thanks for unpacking all of that for us. CBC's Tom Perry in Jerusalem.
Thank you.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says a wave of Russian airstrikes has killed at least 16 people. Dozens more are injured. Kyiv's air defense system intercepts a missile over the capital. The mayor says 4 people were killed there, including a 12-year-old boy. In Odessa, officials say at least 7 others died in the overnight attacks. Ukrainian authorities say Russia launched more than 700 missiles and drones. Meanwhile, Russia says Ukraine launched a cross-border attack that killed 2 children. The strikes come after a short ceasefire for Orthodox Easter celebrations last weekend. Both sides are accusing the other of numerous violations. A veteran Canadian military police officer is suing Ottawa and U.S. gunmaker Sig Sauer. He alleges his new pistol fired without the trigger being pulled, and the injuries he sustained in the incident ended his career. As Murray Brewster reports, there have been similar concerns with the weapon in the U.S.
I'd known that there'd been issues, but I didn't know to the extent until after my injury.
After spending most of his career shooting a Second World War-era Browning 9mm pistol, military police officer, Master Warrant Officer Jamie Delorier says he was just excited to have a new gun. That was until his brand new C-22 went off unexpectedly as he was unholstering it, wounding him in the foot and effectively ending his military career. It was only during his convalescence that he read about all of the lawsuits and injuries in the U.S. related to the pistol and how a Canadian Special Forces soldier was wounded 5 years ago before the federal government bought the weapon for the entire military.
This weapon is flawed. I was extremely angry with the fact that we procured this weapon.
Delorier is now suing the federal government and Sig Sauer, the U.S. manufacturer, claiming that the gun is defective and fires without a trigger pull. His lawyer is Lane Foster.
We think that Sig Sauer needs to take some responsibility for what's happening instead of continuing to point towards user error.
What's also significant about this case is just last year, DND told CBC News there had been no accidental misfires or injuries related to the rollout of the new weapons. DND declined comment about this case, saying it's before the courts. Sig Sauer also did not respond to requests for comment. Murray Brewster, CBC News, Ottawa.
Imperial Oil is apologizing for a pipeline spill near Cold Lake, Alberta. The company says more than 840,000 litres of a substance called bitumen emulsion spilled last week. The spill has been stopped and contained. Cleanup and remediation efforts are underway. Alberta's energy regulator says so far no impacts to wildlife or bodies of water have been identified. The Canadian real estate market may be slowing down even more. The latest projection from the Canadian Real Estate Association is out, and it says forget about earlier predictions the real estate market might heat up. Anis Sadari explains.
At an open house in the Greater Toronto Area, this realtor's job might be a bit tougher these days, and that's backed up by the latest projections from the Canadian Real Estate Association. It's downgrading its forecast for the housing market in this country.
Definitely a quieter spring than we had been expecting not so long ago.
Sean Cathcart is senior economist with the association in Ottawa. He says they're now projecting fewer home sales and lower prices for 2026, in part because fixed mortgage rates are higher.
So our current forecast has a lot of those buyers going back to the sidelines to see if those rates are going to come back down.
The Real Estate Association's national average home price for this year is now projected to be nearly $10,000 less than they were estimating just a few months ago, with provinces like BC, Alberta, and Ontario forecast for, quote, virtually no growth. Sean Cathcart says on top of higher mortgages, many sellers don't want to drop their prices.
And until you have a situation like a recession or really massive job losses or something, then people are just not going to be inclined to sell for a price that they don't agree to.
And all the stainless steel appliances.
The next forecast isn't until July, well into the summer, which would normally be a busier time for home sales. Anis Sadari, CBC News, Calgary.
Flooding is forcing several Ontario communities to declare a state of emergency. Heavy rains and fast-melting snowpack have led to warnings across Ontario and Quebec, with regions around Lake Huron particularly hard hit. Marion Sontag owns a fishing lodge in the northern Ontario community of Willisville. She says the water rose so fast they couldn't keep up.
At our deepest point right now in our parking lot, it's up to your chest. So even chest waders are going to be, I'm not sure they're going to be enough. We had, a neighbor come and was driving through our parking lot in his boat.
Environment Canada expects temperatures to stay above freezing with more rain in the forecast this week. And finally, a stunning admission from the Canada Revenue Agency coming just as tax season hits full swing. CBC's The Fifth Estate has learned the CRA mistakenly approved a $5 million refund to a BC businesswoman last year, even though her tax return was allegedly riddled with false information. Daniel LeBlanc has the story.
Is it someone trying to fraud the CRA, or is it just someone that doesn't know how to file?
Raphael Clément is an expert in Canadian tax law, but he's never seen anything like the court dispute between the Canada Revenue Agency and BC businesswoman Teresa Wallace. In a tax return submitted in 2024, she claimed $10 million in new revenues, on which she said she'd paid the exact same amount in taxes. As a result, she sought and received a $5 million refund after her file was reviewed by 2 CRA officials.
How is it possible that she was able to get the refund even with those forms that are clearly there is something going on that is not proper?
The CRA reviewed the case a third time and finally determined she had submitted allegedly falsified information. The agency obtained an emergency order earlier this year from the federal court to freeze Wallace's assets. With $4.2 million still in her accounts, Wallace told the court she did not attempt to liquidate the funds and is seeking access to her bank accounts to resume regular business operations. Insiders and experts argue it would be much easier if the CRA learned from past mistakes and didn't authorize this type of refund in the first place. The Conservative Party's revenue critic Gérard Dettel said the CRA should focus its energies on big files rather than nickel and diming regular taxpayers.
In the last 10 years, we have seen a lack of leadership and seriousness at the CRA.
The CRA said that it cannot comment on individual tax cases, but insisted it's continuously adapting its safeguards to address evolving risks. Daniel Leblanc, CBC News, Ottawa.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. Remember, for news anytime, our website, cbcnews.ca, including a lot more. Their top story this hour, our CRA story. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Manitoba YouTube page. Yes, it is mid-April despite the forecast. It's kind of serving February out there right now, but and we had a really nice taste of spring yesterday, but winter is back in full force. There is a special weather statement in effect for much of southern Manitoba, so we're going to get you plugged into that just ahead. Also this hour on the show, the price that you see online might not be the price that I see. That's because some companies are using our data to determine how much we're willing to pay. So we're going to learn more about what's known as surveillance pricing. Also, this hour, after a first round of marathon peace negotiations failed to end the war between the U.S. and Iran, the two countries now face the ticking clock of an expiring ceasefire. So what happens now? We're going to have that conversation. But first on the show, we're going to hear from the Winnipeg Blue Bombers president about a record profit for the team. That's coming up first here on Information Radio. But right now, 6:11, let's check in with Heather Wells with a look at news headlines.
Good morning. Well, Winnipeggers who use drugs are being urged to test them after a recent rash of deaths. Resource Assistance for Youth says in the past 2 weeks, 5 people have died after using drugs. The executive director there, Kate Schoberg, says they and the people they serve and those who serve them are all feeling a tremendous moment of loss. Schoberg says changes to the drug supply have made it more toxic and more unpredictable. People in Peguis First Nation are still waiting and watching, preparing for potentially devastating spring flooding again. More than 200 homes are at risk in a community that's seen major floods time and time again. Melvin Spence has lived through many of them and says the damage can last years. For his own experience, his house has been condemned twice. He is still living in it, but the mold is making him sick. We'll hear more coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
That's Heather Wells at your CBC News desk. Abby Adiemi is in with a look at what is a very wintry day out there in pretty much right across the province.
Right across the province, Korea, I'll tell you. And just checking out the Flin Flon area, they already got hammered as at between yesterday and today. But at least they will get some relief today with the sun showing up while they clean up. But for the southern part of the province, the Brandon and the Dauphin area already getting their feel of that system coming through. Hence this weather statement, which is in effect for all of southern Manitoba as this late season winter storm moves through today, and it's going to be sticking around even up until Friday morning. It's really aiming. We're tracking it all the way from the Parkland region, and it will get to the Red River Valley and Pembina Valley region later in the day. The biggest concern is actually the freezing rain that is kind of coming towards the Trans-Canada Highway corridor, which could make roads kind of sleek and unpredictable. So take that into consideration. But once the system comes through, we are looking at a decent amount of snow accumulation on the ground. We're talking about 15 centimeters in some areas once the system comes through. But today's forecast for Winnipeg and the Red River Valley region, we're looking at risk of freezing rain starting sometime this afternoon, with the winds coming from the north, and it's going to get gusty at some point all the way to 50, 60. -6, -7 in the city at this time, cloudy skies. We aim for a high of 0 today, followed by, dropping to about -5 tonight. And this system is going to continue into tomorrow. Across the southern region, we're also seeing the storm still moving through, and we'll see temperatures hover between -5 and -10 this morning from Brandon all the way down to Gimlet. But the big concern is the sleeky roads and slushy conditions that will be moving through the region. Up north, it still feels close to -31 as you travel towards Churchill this morning. Current temperatures around Tadoula Lake, we're looking at -23. Winnipeg, we are at -6 at this time.
Thank you very much, Abby.
Thank you.
This week, I don't know if it's better or worse that we had a relatively nice day yesterday. I was out in a t-shirt yesterday, and here we are.
Spoiler, I slept through the whole thing.
Okay. Maybe that's for the better, because now it kind of it hurts a little bit more to see what it's like outside right now. It really does. Sierra Sanders is in with a look at your commute, which I imagine is going to be deteriorating throughout the morning.
Yeah, I think today is going to be the story of the highways, Corey. I took a quick look at Manitoba 511, and we're already seeing a highway being a portion of the Highway 1, I should say, being reported as covered. Highway 1 from the Saskatchewan border to around Griswold there. Manitoba 511 is reporting it as covered. There is one singular plow out there making sure that road is cleared. So shout out to that hero this morning who is out there. And I think that's just a reminder throughout the morning. And I'll make sure to remind you to check Manitoba 511 before you hit the highways today, if that is your plan. That weather system does look to be moving through the west region already. So I imagine some highways will start to deteriorate a little bit quicker than others. So keep an eye out for that. But if you're out there and you are out there where the weather is hitting, I'd love to hear from you and let us know what you're seeing out there. Or if something is bothering you here in the city, give me a call. The number to call this morning is 204-788-3093.
While it may not have been the Winnipeg Blue Bombers' best season on the score sheet, 2025 was a touchdown for the club's balance sheet. The community-owned club posted a record operating profit of $12.1 million. Around half of that amount came from a sold-out 112th Grey Cup game and festival. And the Bombers' president and CEO, Wade Miller, says the big number wasn't totally unexpected.
When you sell out the entire stadium for the first time in franchise history and lead the league for the fourth year in attendance and corporate partnership was the best ever, you're going to have a great year. And then add the Grey Cup to that and the festival that was completely sold out, it's going to be an unbelievable year. And that's a result of, our fans and our entire staff and organization that have truly made Princess Auto Stadium just an unbelievable game day experience. And we're going to try to find a way to maintain that level. And obviously the year you only get a Grey Cup every 8 to 10 years, right? So that's not going to happen all the time, but we're going to work really hard to fill the stadium again this year and have another really successful season. You know, we reinvest every single year to ensure the longevity of the stadium for our fans and the community. And, you know, fans coming this year for 2026 are going to notice 2 brand new big video boards that were end of life. And, you know, the resolution on them is better, but, you know, those things are expensive items that will be in the 2026 numbers, right? You know, 10 years, 11 years ago, we believed that we could sell out the stadium if we kept working hard, invested back into the game, amateur football, grow the game of amateur football, both tackle and flag, which the numbers are record-setting of kids playing football, both boys and girls. The more people playing football, the more invested into the football club. We know that's going to attract new fans and grow that fan base. And, you know, that's just one segment of our fans, right? And last year in 2025, we had 3,700 kids go through our free youth football camps at all different levels for tackle and football. And we've been doing that for a lot of years, and that growth is going to help grow the game. And that's just one segment of the, you know, fans or the football fans and families. Then you've got the diehard CFL fans, and then what Princess Auto Stadium and our fans have built is the entire experience, where there's probably 30% of the fans that could tell you who won at the end of the game, but not what the score was. You do not need to be a football fan to be here. You need to enjoy being a part of, you know, something that's truly unique. And 10 times a year, 11 times a year, come into Princess Auto Stadium, watch a Blue Bomber football game is something that people want to do and be a part of.
Wade Miller is president and CEO of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Well, time now 6:19 here on Information Radio. In Winnipeg right now, we are sitting at -5. Brandon is at -7, and Dauphin is at -10. Experiencing some light snow right now. In Thompson, you're sitting at -17. And as kind of mentioned earlier, it definitely feels a little bit more like a mild February day out there, I guess you would probably call it, but is in fact mid-April. So we're going to lean into that a little bit with some music. Singer-songwriter Allison Russell has released a new tune called No Springtime. I know, a little bit on the nose. She said the song is about, quote, the blues, sadness, melancholy, and the idea that there is no light without shadows. Well, on this track, she's joined by American country and root singer Joy Oladokun and Julie Williams. Here they are now with No Springtime on CBC Radio 1.
3 in the meadow and 2 by the lake. How many songbirds will it take to tell me so I still don't get it wrong? What's gone is gone is gone is gone. 5 silhouettes on the telephone pole, 1 outside your bedroom window. You don't know what you thought you knew. There's no springtime in the blues. I see you going back there again, to the moment where it all went wrong. Rubbernecking on the highway wreck, then you see your own body lying on the ground. I know you're looping and you're looping and you're looping. It feels like you're never gonna break on through. I'll never cast that stone on you, 'cause oh my God, I do it too. 7 in the woods, 4 by the river. How many magpies spell forever? Tell me so we don't get it wrong. What's gone is gone is gone is gone. 9 black lotus floating on the pond. 8 violins on a midnight lawn. We don't know what we thought we knew. There's no springtime in the blues. I see you going back there again, to the moment where it all went wrong. Rubbernecking on the highway wreck, then you see your own body lying on the ground.
singer-songwriter Allison Russell, joined by Joy Aludokun and Julie Williams with No Springtime. Kind of feels like it was written just for today, wasn't it? Our friends over at CBC Music are calling it a song you need to hear, but you can kind of feel it too on a day like this. Well, 6:23 right now, and next up here on Information Radio, the Trump administration representatives say they, quote, feel good about the prospects of a deal with Iran. But it's unclear if the two sides can come back to the table and compromise before a ceasefire expires next week. One round of peace talks held in Pakistan failed to bring the war any closer to an end, and the Strait of Hormuz remains blockaded, and strikes between Israel and Lebanon continue. For more, we go to Wesley Wark. He is a senior fellow at the Center for International Governance Innovation and a fellow at the Basili School of International Affairs. We reached him in Ottawa this morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Corey.
So what's the latest update on the status of peace talks right now?
The latest news is really expressions of optimism from the U.S. side that peace talks will resume. The ceasefire is holding. The head of the Pakistani armed forces was in Tehran recently, obviously to encourage the Iranians to come back themselves to the peace table and to continue these talks. So I think we'll see the ceasefire continue. I think we'll see negotiations resume, presumably in Pakistan. But that's only the beginning of a long and difficult road. And I think both parties, main parties to this conflict, Iran and the United States, are going to look for some early wins for them as they define them, particularly over the question of reopening the Strait of Hormuz. So that's going to be number one. And if there can be any kind of breakthrough on reopening the strait, then I think that's a good sign for solving some of the other, very thorny issues.
Mm-hmm. So, of course, the last round didn't end well. But so now what's the strategy going into this next round for the U.S.?
Well, I think the strategy has to be patience. I mean, the expectations around a quick solution to this war, I think, were completely unrealistic. The American delegation is going to have to come back with a willingness to understand the negotiations are going to be lengthy and difficult, and are going to be kind of stepwise. Everyone is going to look for some progress on some early issues, and longer and lengthier negotiations on others. The whole set of trailing issues beyond the Strait of Hormuz and the question of Iran's nuclear weapons program. Those are probably the two big ones, but a whole host of other issues to be settled before the war can be understood to be over for any significant period of time. So patience is going to be a key. Bringing expertise to the table, I think, is going to be a key as well. And one of the challenges for the United States is really trying to understand who they're dealing with on the Iranian side, because the Iranian delegation does seem to be a mixture of hardliners and what we might call pragmatists. But many of the figures may be relatively unknown to the U.S. because, many of the previous leaders of the Iranian regime on both the military and political side and religious side have been killed in the airstrikes since the war began. So the U.S. is going to have to figure out whether Iran is able to, in terms of its delegation, reach a settlement, and the Americans are going to have to demonstrate some willingness to compromise and certainly degrees of patience that they haven't shown much of so far.
And how is Iran responding to all this so far?
Well, the Iranians, I think, feel themselves to be in a relatively good position, not least because when Trump announced the ceasefire back on April 7th, he agreed to an Iranian 10-point plan as a beginning or a foundation for negotiations. So I think the Iranians took that as a win. And I think the Iranians also felt that they had made some progress in the initial long, sort of 20-plus hour negotiation that had taken place in Pakistan. So I think, to as best we can guess, the Iranians see some prospects of success in negotiations going forward. But I think they also appreciate they're really up against some maximalist demands from the United States. As the United States knows, they're up against some maximalist demands from Iran.
And this ceasefire does come with a deadline. Might in only just under a week or so. What if talks do stall? Where does that leave the ceasefire?
I think the ceasefire, I mean, it's a crystal ball moment, Corey, but I think the ceasefire will be maintained for as long as it takes. That's in the interests of both the Iranians and the United States. Both are looking for an end to this war. From an American perspective, the Trump administration wants an exit ramp. They want to be able to proclaim victory. The war is really hurting them domestically. Midterm elections are coming up in November. President Trump's approval ratings are really in the basement at the moment. So the United States has a huge incentive to find a way to end this war. So does Iran. It's suffered enormous destruction and loss of capabilities, and its economy is going to be vastly hurt by an ongoing closure of the Strait of Hormuz. So at the very least, both sides would like to say they've won, but both sides would also like to see this war settled.
So you think the days of the saber rattling and the threats to end Iranian civilization from Trump are over for now?
It's impossible to predict about Donald Trump, but the Iranians are going to have to learn, as other world leaders have learned, to tune him out on occasion and not to take whatever he says too seriously. It's partly why the Iranians want to negotiate with the Vice President, J.D. Vance, who they believe was, lukewarm or even an opponent of the war in the first place. So they see Vance, whether this is realistic or not, as a bit of an ally for them in the negotiation. So it'll be an interesting sign to see whether Vance, again, heads an American delegation to what we presume are going to be resumed negotiations in Pakistan.
Well, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much, Wesley, for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks so much, Corey.
Wesley Wark is a senior fellow at the Center for International Governance Innovation and a fellow with the Basili School of International Affairs. We reached him in Ottawa this morning. 6:29 right now. Just taking a quick look at Manitoba 511. I've been keeping an eye on it all morning, and I'm watching the highways slowly turn from black to white, which means covered conditions. And now Highway 1 from the Saskatchewan border right to Brandon is being reported as covered as that system makes its way through. There is a special weather statement in effect for southern Manitoba. We do expect a system to come through with a potential for freezing rain and snow as well. So by the end of the show today, I imagine there's going to be a lot more covered highway conditions as that system makes its way east. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. You can give us a call, 204-788-3093 on our commuter line if you want to tell us what you're seeing out there. Right now, though, time for your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it is -6. Corey mentioned that special weather statement. In western Manitoba, your snow begins earlier. For Winnipeg, we're not expecting snow until after midnight into Friday. But what we will see is a risk of freezing rain late this morning and this afternoon. A windy day with a cold high of 0. A Winnipeg youth outreach group is warning of toxic drugs after a recent rash of deaths. Resource Assistance for Youth says in the past 2 weeks, 5 people have died after using drugs. Kate Schoberg is the organization's executive director. She says staff knew 4 of the people who died, including one who was only 19. The other person lived in a Manitoba housing building they serve. She says the deaths have hit the community hard.
Many people that we serve have already lost people to the drug toxicity crisis. And so it's not just the loss of their best friend, it's a reminder of the other people that they've lost previously.
Schoberg says changes to the drug supply have made it more toxic and unpredictable. That includes the introduction of the animal tranquilizer metatomidine. People in Peguis First Nation are preparing for potentially devastating flooding as crews work to protect homes ahead of the spring melt. Runoff of the Fisher and Icelandic rivers is expected soon, and officials warn some people may have to leave. Melvin Spence says flooding is something he has been dealing with for decades. He says the impacts don't end when the water goes down.
I did that for 50 years. Every year, every second year, it floods bad. If you still have people staying in hotels for 4 or 5 years, they have no place to come back at it.
Federal officials say they are working with Peguis to find a long-term solution to the chronic flooding. Meanwhile, the Red Cross says it is working with partners to deploy flood protection equipment in the community. A 45-year-old woman faces an assault charge after a nurse was punched at the hospital in the paw. RCMP were called to St. Anthony's General Hospital Sunday. The nurse suffered minor injuries. Darlene Jackson at the Manitoba Nurses Union says attacks on health staff mean worse outcomes for patients.
It's becoming more and more common, and what we're looking for as a union and as nurses is to have the employer and the government step up and provide a safe workplace for not just nurses, but every healthcare worker, but also for patients.
A spokesperson for the Northern Health Region says it is committed to having safe and respectful facilities. Winnipeg City staff are recommending against moving ahead with a managed encampment for people experiencing homelessness, at least for now. A new report says the sites would be costly to run, possibly more than $1 million with staffing over 5 months. It also says the province is focused on housing through its Your Way Home strategy. Mayor Scott Gillingham agrees with that recommendation.
I'll be supporting the staff's recommendation to not move forward with the managed encampment site. The City of Winnipeg is in partnership with the province of Manitoba on the Your Way Home strategy. We know collectively there is a lot of work that we have to do to address homelessness, and we are taking action.
Advocates have pushed for a managed site as a way to better protect people in encampments with housing and services. Council's Executive Policy Committee will review that report next week. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says a wave of Russian airstrikes has killed at least 16 people, injuring dozens more. Kyiv's air defense system intercepting a missile over the capital. The mayor says 4 people were killed there, including a 12-year-old boy. In Odessa, officials say at least 7 others died in overnight attacks. Ukrainian authorities say Russia launched more than 700 missiles and drones. Meanwhile, Russia says Ukraine launched a cross-border attack that killed 2 children. The strikes come after a short ceasefire for Orthodox Easter celebrations this past weekend. Both sides are accusing the other of numerous violations. U.S. President Donald Trump says the leaders of Israel and Lebanon will speak today, which would be their first conversation in more than 30 years. But the Lebanese government says it knows nothing about it. You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. An increase in retail theft in Brandon is bad for businesses and dangerous for shoppers. That from Brandon's Chamber of Commerce. It says Brandon businesses have seen a 40% increase in shoplifting, and that's why it wants all levels of government to help fund a public safety audit. The Chamber's Curtis Hullock says shoplifters are more aggressive than ever.
They're seeing weapons, and everyone is getting concerned for the safety of the patrons, the safety of the staff, and the financial impact that this is having on the business community in Brandon.
2 years ago, Brandon police conducted a retail blitz. They recovered more than $10,000 in stolen goods and made 70 arrests. You can find the latest news as it's updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
It's Heather Wells at your CBC News Desk. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1. I'm Corey Funk, in from Marcy Marcusa. Let's check in now with Abby Adeyemi, who's got a look at your wintry forecast for the day.
Yes, let's start with the weather statement we have in effect for all of southern Manitoba this morning, which also includes us here in the Red River Valley region. We're tracking this late season winter storm as it moves through the region, and it's going to be staying with us up until Friday. The biggest concern actually is more of this risk of freezing rain along the southern part of the Trans-Canada Highway corridor, which could really be making travel very sleek and unpredictable. I know we already got like dump of snow in that part of the province, so along with the slushiness, you might be noticing some slick conditions underneath those fresh patch of ice you're seeing on the highways. Now, in the western and central Manitoba, we're also tracking mostly a lot of snow coming that way. We're talking about between 4 to 8 centimeters coming to some areas, while some areas in the higher terrain could even see heavier dump up to 15 centimeters centimeters. That's all adding in total what's been coming down yesterday up until today, and once the system clears. So there's still a lot of system coming your way, but keep an eye out for those freezing rain that will be coming down. Just make sure plan for extra travel time and stay alert, whether you're dealing with the patchy ice in the south or the accumulation of snow coming towards your region in the central part. Be prepared for that. For Winnipeg right now, we're looking at temperatures around -6 and -7 at the airports and at the Forks. We'll see temperatures hover around this, this digit for most of the day. High for the day is expected to be around 0 with snow and freezing rain continuing through tonight into tomorrow. Now in the Pembina Valley region around Port La Prairie, we're tracking -5 there, warming up to -4. The risk of freezing rain. Brandon getting some snow coming your way, also -7 at this time and cloudy. The snow should end by the afternoon period, while for the Dauphin and Russell area, we have ongoing snow there. Temperatures around -10. Gimli and nearby, snow beginning this morning. You're currently around -8. Now, for track conditions into the northern part, we're seeing clear skies around the Par and Flin Flin. We're looking at temperatures close to -8 in the region. Thompson, Lynn Lake, Gillam hovering between -16 and -22. To Dune Lake, we're looking at -23 there. Wind chill feels like -31. And for the York and Churchill region, we're seeing -16 there, warming up to a high of -10. Though the wind chill is something you take into consideration. So it's more like a messy winter blast for the south, while the north enjoys some clear conditions, but it's still going to stay cold. For Winnipeg, we're expecting freezing rain and a high of 0 today. Currently, we're seeing temperatures around -6 in the city.
Thank you very much, Abby.
Thank you.
We do also have one school bus cancellation already. That's in the DSFM, the Division Scolaire Francophone Manitoba. It's cancelling bus transportation for École Saint-Lazare this morning. So we'll keep an eye on that as well throughout the morning if there are any more school bus cancellations or school cancellations. But as of right now, that's all we know so far. Just École Saint-Lazare buses are canceled. Let's check in now with Sierra Sanders, who has a look at your commute. Hello.
Hi, Corey. The stories of the highways continues, and I think that is going to be a theme on today's show. Since my last update there at the top of the show, there has been a lot more kind of action out there, specifically out west and out north there, or up north there, with highways. So from the Saskatchewan border to Brandon, it's being reported. So Highway 1 from the Saskatchewan border to Brandon is being reported as covered. So you want to keep that in mind as well. Highways around Brandon are also being reported as partly covered. And as you head a little bit east on Highway 1 there, and conditions are starting to deteriorate out west there. So a number of highways being reported as covered. As I mentioned, Highway 1 from the Saskatchewan border to Brandon is being reported as covered. And highways around Russell, Birtle, Verdon, around those areas, those highways are being reported as covered as well. And almost every highway north of Grand Rapids is seeing deteriorating conditions as well, with covered and partly covered highways and reduced visibility as well. So this is just a reminder to check Manitoba 511 if you are heading out on the highways today, and be aware of any highway closures, because there are some factors that also play in there when you travel on a closed highway. So you want to keep that in mind as well. I would love to hear about what folks are seeing out there. So if you are in any of these areas and you're starting to see that weather system move into your community, I'd love to know what you're seeing out there. Or if you're here in the city of Winnipeg and there's something getting in your way, I'd love to know about that too. The number to call is 204-788-3093.
Thank you very much, Sierra. That's Sierra Sanders, our studio director. Well, Crystalie Ram-McCann is here now with your business report. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Corey.
So the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses says the country is losing businesses faster than it creates new ones. So what else can you tell us about that?
Well, the CFIB says it's time for the federal and provincial governments to reverse the trend. A new report from the organization calls it an entrepreneurial drought, which it defines as a year or more where business entry rates are strictly lower than business exit rates. So it says the drought has been ongoing since 2024, making it the worst period for entrepreneurs outside of the pandemic. So the report says more than half of small business owners are discouraging entrepreneurship at this time because of things like financial risks, regulatory hurdles, trade concerns, and long-term uncertainty. And the sentiment is most strongly felt in the hospitality, manufacturing, and transportation sectors. So the CFIB says while there is ambition here in Canada, the environment to take risks just does not exist here. Now, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, an international forum of 38 democracies, says Canada's productivity growth has been far behind our neighbors to the south, the U.S., since the year 2000. And it also projects Canada to have the lowest real GDP per capita growth among its members until 2060. So the CFIB hopes to see governments take action to address the rising cost of doing business by doing things such as improving labor mobility across provincial borders and reducing regulatory burdens.
Also next, the big loss for companies that sell concert tickets. Live Nation and Ticketmaster have actually been found anti-competitive. So what other details do you have on that?
Yes, so a jury has found Live Nation and its Ticketmaster subsidiary had a harmful monopoly over big concert venues. So it has dealt the company a loss in a lawsuit over claims brought by dozens of U.S. states. And the verdict could cost Live Nation and Ticketmaster hundreds of millions of dollars just for the $1.72 per ticket. The jury found they overcharged consumers in 22 states. So the companies could also face penalties and sanctions to divest themselves from some of the venues they own. And the case, kind of gave fans the equivalent of a backstage pass to a business that dominates live entertainment. It seems like you pretty much have to go through them if you want to see any live show. So Live Nation's CEO was questioned on the witness stand about issues including the company's 2022 Taylor Swift ticketing debacle, which saw, many technical failures. The CEO blamed a cyber attack, though. And then the proceedings also aired a Live Nation executive's internal messages declaring some prices outrageous, calling customers, quote, so stupid, and boasting that the company was robbing them blind. So Live Nation now says it intends to refute the ruling and says there could be future appeals.
Wow, that's quite the evidence. And finally here, and we are seeing job cuts in the tech sector now?
Yes, that's right. So Snap, which is the company behind social media app Snapchat, plans to lay off about 1,000 employees, including 16% of its full-time staff, as the social media firm looks to lower costs and leverage AI to boost productivity. So the move comes after an activist investor pushed the company to optimize its portfolio and improve performance. Snap says advances in artificial intelligence are allowing it to streamline operations, reduce repetitive work, and operate with smaller teams. So shares of the social media company have gone up in pre-market trading. The stock has fallen about 31% so far this year. And Snap joins a growing list of companies announcing job cuts in the tech industry. Now, with the layoffs, Snap expects to reduce its annual expenses by more than $500 million by the second half of this year. And the company has really been pouring a lot of its resources into its smart glasses company, Specs. It is gearing up to launch the product later this year, but its rival, Meta, as we know, already leads that market.
Thank you very much, Crystal Lee.
Thanks, Corey.
That's Crystal Lee Ramlakan with your business news. Well, Saskatoon rock and rollers, the Sheepdogs, are playing here in Winnipeg tomorrow, and I wonder if they're on their way right now, because if they're coming from Saskatoon, they might be in for a bit of a ride on the highways. Right now, it is partly covered, or covered actually, from Saskatoon or Saskatchewan border to Brandon on the highways. Conditions are deteriorating. So here they are now. This is Keep Out of the Storm and the Sheepdogs on CBC Radio 1.
in her hair. Ever since I turned 18, like living in a bad, bad dream. Now it's time to draw the line out at the borderline. If you know what I mean, I got to keep out of the stove. I got to hide it, keep it warm. I got to keep out of the stove. I got to find another home. How long has this been going on? Feels like I'm under a spell. No signs of stopping, it's coming on strong. They keep on ringing that bell. I got to keep out of the stove. I got to hide it, keep it warm. I got to keep out of the stove. I got to find another home. Long gone now, babe, I can't go on. I know you cannot as well. No signs of stopping, it's coming on strong. They keep on ringing that bell. I got to keep out of the stove. I got to hide it, keep it warm. I got to keep out of the stove. I got to find another home. I got to keep out of the stove. I got to hide it, keep it warm. I got to keep out of the stove. I got to find another home. I got to keep out of the stove.
Well, that's the Sheepdogs with the title "Keep Out of the Storm." Let's hope they follow their own advice, because they're from Saskatoon and they're playing at the Burton Cummings Theatre tomorrow. But today, though, actually they will be in town. I know that for sure, because they're going to be on Up to Speed in studio with our guest host Julie Buckingham. So stay tuned for that. So just a quick update on your highway conditions right now. Pretty much everything west of Brandon now is being reported as covered, as well as west and north of Brandon. So those highways there, conditions are continuing to deteriorate this morning as that system makes its way through southern Manitoba. So the areas around Russell, Birtle, and now is moving east like Rivers, Minnedosa, Sandy Lake, all those areas now, those highways around there are starting to be reported as covered or partly covered. So you may run into some snow drifts or icy patches. So careful on the highways this morning. We're going to be keeping an eye on that. There is a special weather statement in effect for much of southern Manitoba. There is a system moving through the province as we speak, making its way from west to east. And we do expect potentially some freezing rain and at least 4 to 8 centimeters of snow, but even higher in the Parkland region, maybe more like 15 centimeters of snow. Well, next up here on Information Radio, the data on your phone, everything from your search history to your location to your battery life, could be affecting the prices you're shown by retailers and service providers. Now, the practice is called surveillance pricing, and it was just the subject of an NDP motion this week in the House of Commons calling for it to be banned. Now, that motion will not go any further, but the federal government did say it's looking into the issues. Giles Crouch is a digital anthropologist and a principal at NordSpark, a cultural strategy firm, and he joins us now. Good morning.
Good morning.
So what do we know about how companies are using surveillance pricing?
Well, if you've done online shopping recently for hotel rooms, airlines, ride-sharing services, then surveillance pricing has been used on you. And what's happening now is that that's moving over to the retail sector. And what this means is they're looking at your phone, your purchase history, your browsing history, all this kind of data and the data they have on you, perhaps from your loyalty card. And they know the demographics, like where you come from, your postal code. So they can use this data all combined together with artificial intelligence to determine, will you pay more or a little bit less for a price at any given time?
So how big of a, is it just a few cents, a few dollars? Like how big is the price difference from one person to the next?
Well, we don't really know. It's a very opaque type of service. So you and I could be standing in a grocery store in the same aisle, and based on our data, they might charge me $2 or $3 more for an item, or you $2 or $3 less, based on that history and what they think you're willing to pay. Or I should say the algorithm thinks you're willing to pay. There's no human in the loop here.
And do we know how many companies, is there a way of knowing whether companies are using or how many companies are using surveillance pricing at all? Do they have to disclose?
Yeah, so there's no need to, they don't have to disclose because there's no regulations in Canada around this. So they don't even have to tell you that they're using surveillance pricing. You have no idea. I have no idea. So because there's no regulations in place, how many? That's really hard to say. From my discussions with brands and chains in Canada so far, I know a lot of them are experimenting with surveillance pricing. Some of them have implemented it, others haven't. But it's sort of the early experimental phase, if you will.
And this NDP motion I just mentioned earlier, it said it's not going to go any further, but it did call for a ban on surveillance pricing online, but also in store. How does in-store surveillance pricing work?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I know Manitoba is putting forward some laws as well. So in the store, what happens is we all use our smartphones today. So if you have your loyalty card open, because they have internet access in the store, and if some of them are using digital pricing tags, which send out a ping. So when you're walking by that price tag, it pings your phone. It has all that data on you, and the algorithm can make a decision and say, okay, we can charge this person a few cents more, a few dollars more, and they're likely to pay for it. So that's how it works, is because they've got all this data and your phone is broadcasting about you when you're in the store as well. So that's how they're collecting it in the store in real time.
Oh, that's a kind of gives me the heebie-jeebies a little bit. Can we, as consumers, opt out of surveillance pricing at all?
No, we can't. Because there's no regulation, there's no requirement for an opt-out option at this point. So we don't even have to know that they're doing this. They don't even have to put it in the terms of service, although some of them do. But how many of us read the terms of service? It's that big, long legal document. We just hit agree and off we go. So there's absolutely no requirement for them to tell us that they're doing this, and we have no options at all. So we have to sort of take action ourselves.
So do you think there is merit then in banning it outright?
Well, I don't think we can ban it outright because of laws that are in place and retailers have rights. But what I think is important is that there are some regulations about when they can use this. And for example, the regulation could say they're not allowed to use your loyalty card in order to determine what prices they charge you at any time. There could be a requirement that they give you full notification that they're using surveillance pricing and give you the opportunity to opt out or opt in.
Okay. Well, Giles, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Giles Crouch is a digital anthropologist and a principal at NordSpark, a cultural strategy firm. We reached him this morning in Halifax. Well, time now is 6:55 here on Information Radio. And still stay tuned here. Lots to come. Coming up after 7 o'clock, the head of a local food trucking company says ditching the federal gas tax won't make a meaningful dent in the cost of transporting food. We're going to hear why. He oversees a fleet of about 50 trucks here in Manitoba, so he's going to talk about what he'd like to see to make the cost of transporting food less. That's coming up after 7 o'clock. But right now, let's check in with Heather Wells with a look at news headlines.
Good morning. Well, people in Peguis First Nation are still waiting and watching, preparing for potentially devastating spring flooding again. More than 200 homes are at risk in that community. It has seen major floods time and time again. Melvin Spence has lived through many of them. He says the damage can last for years. And he says the house he's living in now has been condemned twice. He's breathing in mold and it's making him sick. So we'll hear from him coming up. As well, a 45-year-old woman faces an assault charge after a nurse was punched at the hospital in the paw. RCMP were called to St. Anthony's General Hospital Sunday night. Police say the nurse suffered minor injuries. Darlene Jackson at the Manitoba Nurses Union says violence in healthcare is getting more common. More news from Manitoba coming up at 7:30.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
That's Heather Wells at your CBC News desk. Right now, Winnipeg, we're sitting at -6 at the Forks. We are heading for a high today of 0, but there is a special weather statement in effect for pretty much the entirety of southern Manitoba this morning. We expect snow, could be as much as 8 centimeters in much of the province, but even more around the Parkland region. And that is having an impact on the highways this morning. Looking at Manitoba 511 right now, you can see Highway 1 from Brandon to the Saskatchewan border being reported as covered right now. As much as a lot of the highways just north of Highway 1 between Brandon and the Saskatchewan border, around Birtle, Russell, Shoal Lake, Rivers area. Now Minnedosa, as that system makes its way east, I expect, over the next couple hours, we're going to see those highway conditions deteriorate. So just heads up, if you're hitting the highways this morning, you can give Sierra Sanders a call. She's standing by on the CBC commuter line to get the updates on what you're seeing out there on the highways. Drive safe out there. 204-788-3093. And also still to come here on Information Radio, with his passion to help people, a Winnipeg teen has won a prestigious Loran Scholars Foundation Award worth $100,000. We're going to hear about his story and how his family came here from Syria. That's coming up. Also, Ontario is moving to link attendance in high schools to final grades as chronic absenteeism in schools continues to be a problem in Manitoba. We're going to ask 2 experts if this system could work here. That conversation coming up right here on Information Radio. I'm Corey Funk, sitting in for Marcy Marcusa. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1. We'll be back after World Report. Stay tuned.
On The Current.
Sam, will you accept this rose?
Reality television has dominated our screens for decades now, but after abuse allegations against one star, there are calls to prioritize the mental health of cast members over the train wreck appeal of the programs. That's coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm John Northcott. U.S. President Donald Trump says the leaders of Israel and Lebanon will speak directly today, but there are major questions this morning about whether that call will actually happen. Overnight, Trump announced that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Lebanese President Joseph Aoun would hold their first direct talks in decades. A statement from the Lebanese president makes no reference to any contact with Israel. But it does say that Aoun spoke with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Our correspondent Chris Brown brings us the latest from Beirut.
If it was celebratory gunfire in the skies over Beirut overnight, it was premature. Both Israeli and Lebanese media outlets are reporting a ceasefire remains a work in progress. That was also the message from Lebanese Cabinet Minister Kamal Shahadi this morning in an interview with CBC News.
I think we're closer, and I'm optimistic. I can't put a date to it.
Lebanon's government is struggling to disarm Hezbollah, and many Lebanese blame the Iran-backed militant group for dragging the country into a disastrous war. Israel has been pounding Lebanon's south, and the IDF has stated it plans to occupy parts of the country for the long haul. Hezbollah has been unrelenting with its rocket attacks on northern Israel. Ambassadors from Israel and Lebanon met in Washington earlier this week in extremely rare direct talks, and that process is continuing, said Shahadi.
These things do not stop with a flick of a button. And I also think there's got to be a political process, there's got to be a diplomatic process, a military process, which we as Lebanese are responsible for. We have to take control of our own borders.
But while the U.S. is reportedly pressuring Israel for a truce, the situation on the battlefield is precarious. Both sides have been fighting over the strategic southern town of Bint Jbeil, and with the battle approaching a turning point, neither side may have any interest in stopping now. Chris Brown, CBC News, Beirut.
Pope Leo is blasting world leaders for spending billions of dollars on war. He's currently visiting a number of African states and had this to say to a gathering in Cameroon.
The world is being ravaged by a handful of tyrants, yet is held together by a multitude of supportive brothers and sisters. They are the descendants of Abraham, as numerous as the stars in the sky and the grains of sand on the seashore.
His comments come as the Trump administration continues to criticize the pontiff and his outspoken opposition to the U.S. war on Iran. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says at least 16 people are dead after Russian attacks overnight. 100 others were injured. Fire rages in an apartment building in Dnipro. 3 people were killed in the southern city, and there are more deaths in Kyiv and Odessa. This is one of the deadliest assaults in almost 6 months. Ukrainian officials say Russia launched more than 700 missiles and drones in the barrage. Crystal Gamansing has more.
It's just scary, that's all. I fear for our country and for everything we have, says Olena Kaputsian. She talks of sadness and fear while looking at the damage to her apartment building, her son collecting metal shards from the ground nearby. It's the second time their building has been hit. Emergency workers rushed to scenes in Kyiv, Dnipro, and Odessa. A young boy was among those killed. Volodymyr Zelensky posted condolences on social media. After more than 4 years of war, the Ukrainian president is still pleading for weapons and munitions from partners so Ukraine can defend itself against Russian aggression. Writing on X, he said another night has proven that Russia does not deserve any easing of global policy or lifting of sanctions. The U.S. waived sanctions on Russian oil purchases to free up supplies and lower skyrocketing energy prices linked to the American-Israeli war in Iran. You don't know what will happen tomorrow in the world or in Ukraine. Where is a safe place, asks Marioslava Valensko, who just returned home from Germany to visit family. The attacks on Ukraine came in waves, fast explosions from ballistic missiles, and the slow, terrifying buzz of drones. In addition to cars and buildings, Ukraine's energy grid was also damaged. Crystal Gamansing, CBC News, London.
In this country, the NDP is getting its parliamentary funding reinstated a year after losing official party status. The party's parliamentary leader, Don Davies, says the cash boost will primarily be used to hire new staff.
You know, it's about $670,000. As you know, Parliament is complex. It moves quickly, it changes, and our ability to participate meaningfully is important to the government, it's important to the functioning, and it'll allow us to hire some staff who will help us discharge that duty.
The rules have changed, so a party now only has to win a minimum of 6 seats to be eligible for parliamentary funding. The government says no extra money is being spent. This is just a reallocation of existing funds. Years after the pandemic, COVID-19 is still sending thousands of Canadians to hospitals annually. Striking new data shows the virus is putting pressure on the country's healthcare system, as are other vaccine-preventable infections. Health reporter Lauren Pelly has more.
People assume that COVID-19 is done, we're done with the pandemic, but what our data is showing is that it's still having a big impact on our hospitals.
Melanie José Davidson is with the Canadian Institute for Health Information. The nonprofit just released new data showing across all age groups, hospitalization rates for all vaccine-preventable respiratory infections in 2024 were double pre-pandemic levels.
That means it's about 60,000 hospitalizations across the country in a year.
That includes flu, RSV, and other infections. 40% of hospital stays were linked to COVID.
So we know these are vaccine preventable diseases. So we would expect if you're vaccinated that you don't have some of the really poor outcomes like being hospitalized.
Unfortunately, vaccine uptake has declined across all age categories.
McMaster University immunologist Matthew Miller attributes the drop to vaccine fatigue. Federal figures show a major backslide even among older adults aged 65 and up, a group that faces a much higher risk of serious illness. Roughly half reported getting a COVID vaccine during the 2024 to 2025 season, while only 6 in 10 got a flu shot.
The need to get regular boosters is an inconvenience, right? And sometimes people just forget, to be frank.
Miller stressed the shots are Canadians' best bet to prevent serious disease and stay out of hospital. Lauren Pelly, CBC News, Toronto.
Flooding is forcing several Ontario communities to declare a state of emergency. Heavy rain and fast-melting snow have led to warnings across Ontario and Quebec, with regions around Lake Huron particularly hard hit. Sudbury resident Jason Breslin says that he has 15 centimeters of water in his basement.
When the rain started, it really got bad, but before that, it was already flooding onto the street, and I'm sure tons of residents here had called the city. By that point, probably too far gone for them to really do anything about it. It needs to be cleaned out in the spring.
Minor flooding also expected along the Ottawa River. Gatineau, Quebec is asking shoreline property owners to prepare for rising water. Environment Canada is warning there is more rain in the forecast this week. Finally, it's not exactly rocket science, but it turns out you can't fly to the moon and back without key help from Canada's National Research Council and its Flight Research Lab. The specialized unit is celebrating its 80th birthday, and what better way to celebrate than a trip to the moon? Stu Mills tells us what the team there has been up to.
Some of my colleagues and trainers on the Canadian Space Agency actually practice with the device.
On a 10-day space mission, fighting muscle and bone density loss is crucial. Since a weight rack wouldn't be much use in zero gravity, Jeremy Hansen and the rest of the Artemis II crew stayed fit using an ingenious trainer resembling a giant yo-yo. They first tried the trainer at 20,000 feet over Ottawa.
In an airplane, a microgravity flight where they could test how it was going to work for us in space.
And if you've ever felt your innards floating in your body while the roller coaster streaks over the apex of the track, then you know how they turn gravity off.
Seeing someone's face that first moment.
Specifically, Sharuk Alavi and his National Research Council team put their Falcon 20, an ordinary-looking white business jet, into a steep dive, then a recovery. It's that parabolic-shaped path that lets astronauts and equipment test drive weightlessness 20 seconds at a time.
It doesn't matter if they're high school co-op student or like a retired military, ex-military. They all have that same look of wonder on their face.
Hansen and the other astronauts relied on biomedical devices, health technology, and experience working in zero-G made possible by Falcon 20 microgravity flights, a small piece of the Ottawa Valley even on the dark side of the moon. Stu Mills, CBC News, Ottawa.
And that's the latest news from World Report. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Manitoba YouTube page. I'm Corey Funk, in for Marcy Marcusa. Well, it certainly feels like April is playing a long, cruel April Fool's joke on us so far this month. Winter is back in full force. We do have conditions deteriorating on the highways in western Manitoba this morning, and there's a special weather statement in effect, and we have sub-zero temperatures across the province after a pretty lovely day yesterday. So we'll get you plugged into what's going on and what to expect as that system moves across southern Manitoba this morning. Also this hour on the show, with chronic absenteeism rife in high schools in Ontario, the province wants to link school attendance to final grades. We're going to speak to an expert on whether Manitoba needs to follow suit. Also, we're going to hear from one of the latest Loran Scholarship winners who wants to help his fellow newcomers. That Loran Scholarship worth $100,000. So we're going to hear the story behind how he landed that scholarship. Right now, though, 7:11, let's check in with Heather Wells with a look at news headlines.
Good morning. Well, Winnipeggers who use drugs are being urged to test them after a recent rash of deaths. Resource Assistance for Youth says in the past 2 weeks, 5 people have died after using drugs. Kate Schoberg, the organization's executive director, says the people they serve and those who serve them are feeling a moment of tremendous loss. Schoberg says changes to the drug supply have made it more toxic and more unpredictable. City of Winnipeg staff are advising against moving ahead with a managed encampment for people experiencing homelessness. A new report says setting up a supervised site would require significant resources and could take away from other efforts already underway. But Marion Willis at St. Boniface Street Links says politicians are not true experts and should be looking to those who are working in the trenches. We'll hear more from her coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
Thank you very much, Heather. Also, just up ahead here, we're going to hear from the head of a local food trucking company who says ditching the federal gas tax will make a bit of a dent in the cost of transporting food, but there is more that could be done. He oversees a fleet of 50 trucks, many of which do transport food. So we're going to chat with him about what he would like to see and just how expensive things have got for him as someone who moves food. So stay tuned. That's coming up just ahead. Right now, though, we do have one bus cancellation in the province right now. École Saint-Lazare and the DSFM is canceling bus transportation today. And that, of course, is due to poor weather conditions. That's all we know so far in terms of bus cancellations. No schools cancel as far as we know so far. Now let's check in with Abby with your weather conditions right now with that special weather statement going on.
Yes, Corey, just checking what's happening out there, and I see light drizzle already in the Brandon area at this time. So you might be having frozen roads, slippery conditions in the Westman region. So take it easy. For the weather statement we have, it's in effect for most of southern Manitoba as this storm brings freezing rain, and there's a risk of even heavy snow through Friday. Looking at the western and the central areas, some areas might get up to 15 centimeters. That's added up on top of what we got yesterday in some areas, plus what will come today into tomorrow. While the north, we're still seeing some clear conditions, sunshine in most regions in the northern part of the province as we speak. -7 at the Forks and at the airport, mostly cloudy outside with windy northern gusts. Morning temperature is going to stay around -6. We warm up to 0 today. There's a good chance of freezing drizzle this afternoon, and then later tonight we'll see those freezing drizzle transition to some snowy conditions when we drop to about -5. Across the southern regions, we're seeing temperatures between -5 and -10. As mentioned, Brandon already getting freezing drizzle at this time as the system brings a mix of light snow and more freezing rain your way. Up north, it's much clearer but frigid with wind chills close to -31. So expect this system to continue through into Friday with this late season blast of ice and snow in the south, while sunny conditions seems to be the thing in the northern part of the province. For Winnipeg today, we're expecting a high of 0. Currently -7 on the cloudy skies, and we're expecting this freezing rain to develop sometime around lunch break.
Thank you very much, Abby.
Thank you.
That's Abby Adiemi. Keeping an eye on your weather. Sierra Sanders, what's going on with the commute right now?
Well, Corey, it's a tale of two separate areas of the province, because out west we see highway conditions starting to deteriorate in certain areas, and then here in Winnipeg in the south central area of the province, it's looking pretty clear outside and traffic seems to be moving pretty smoothly out there. But looking at the highways out west, we are seeing, as I mentioned, deteriorating conditions. So Highway 1 from the Saskatchewan border to Brandon is being reported as covered. Highways around Birtle and Russell being reported as partly covered and covered as well. And then we're kind of seeing a lot of highways north of Brandon being reported as partly covered by Manitoba 511. The plows are out there, especially on the number 1 there, making sure that it is clear for folks who are driving. So you want to be aware of those and proceed with caution when you do see those plows out on the highways there. And then going up north here in the province, highways around the Paw, Cranberry, Portage, Flin Flon are being reported as covered with reduced visibility. I understand that they were hit hard by another weather system that we saw, I think it was last week now, that lots of weather systems lately. And then north of Grand Rapids, we're seeing a lot of the highways being reported as partly covered with reduced visibility. So it's a tale of the highways today, especially out west and up north, where we will be going in the next hour to go chat with some of our rural reporters to see what they are seeing. But if there is something that you want to let me know about, maybe you are in these areas and you want to let me know what you're seeing, or maybe you're here in the city and there's something getting in your way, you can give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number is 204-788-3093.
Well, next up here on Information Radio, we've been talking a lot about how the rising price of gas is impacting our grocery bills. Most recently, some food suppliers have been charging grocers extra to make up for the rising cost of fuel, which can eventually make its way onto your grocery bill. So just how bad is the cost of transporting food these days, and what can be done about it? Gurbir Boparai is the director of Canadian Prairie Transport here in Manitoba, which has a fleet of about 50 trucks, many of which transport food and refrigerated trucks. I spoke with him yesterday and asked him how much fuel costs have gone up for his company since the war in Iran broke out.
Well, since the war, if I have to put it that way, the retail prices for diesel in January were about around $159.57 a liter. It has gone up to $2.30, which is about 45 to 50% increase, 45% increase for the fuel prices that we are paying at the pump.
So what is so overall then? So I think about 40% increase in your fuel cost then?
Yeah, 40 to 45%, yes.
Okay. And so what does that look like? What does it cost to fill up a tank of gas for one semi-truck, just to give people an idea?
Well, if we were filling up a truck at a retail price in January at around $1,600, it is costing us around about, at the retail price, it's going to be around $2,200, $2,300.
Okay, wow. So the Carney government plans to temporarily nix the federal government excise tax, 10 cents for gas, 4 cents for diesel. Your trucks are on diesel. So what dent will that 4 cents less make for you and your company?
Well, of course, any relief is welcome by the government, but I don't see it making a huge impact because the fuel prices are beyond where they should be. They're very, very high right now. With 4 cents down, it's gonna bring down. If we were filling at 2,300, we will be filling at full semi truck at just less 4 cents per liter, right? So which is about $40-50. There should be more policies or relief that should be brought in order to curb these prices. We welcome.
Yeah, what would those policies be that could make transportation less expensive for you and potentially in turn, groceries at the store?
There could be we pay as a transportation company, we pay international fuel tax to every province, and since we are running mostly refrigerated and refrigerated freight, hauling perishables in our temperature-controlled trailers, they also consume fuel. So government can maybe work on exempting at least fuel being consumed by the reefers. The EFTA tax on the fuel being consumed by reefers are the APU units that are on the trucks, which are just used to keep trucks powered on even if the engine is off. So things like those, and there could be some relaxations in the taxation policies, maybe GST credits, or having some liquidity available for the businesses in order to because you're facing the liquidity crisis as well, just because the fuel payments have gone up massively and your cash flow gets impacted by that.
And you go between food suppliers and grocery distributors. What are you hearing about the difficulties they're facing when it comes to pricing out their products on both ends?
Well, the distributors, we are working with the distributors right now in order to share the burden of the increased fuel prices. And if the fuel prices go up, they drive up the cost to the end consumer. I think we have been seeing actually, and we will be seeing marked up prices in the grocery stores on the items. And since energy is a very important factor and transportation, most of the goods in North America are being moved by trucks, and fuel prices going up are going to be reflected in the grocery stores. So they will be adjusting the prices, and it will be impacting the end consumer.
Mm-hmm. And finally, here I just got about a minute or so left, but the margins in the transportation business are notoriously tight as it is. So, what will it mean for your business if gas prices continue to rise?
That's not a very good scenario for a transportation business. It's like you said, margins are quite tight, and it is impacting the bottom line of the business. And if they keep on rising, I'm not sure where we are headed to. And this is not good for the freight economy, not for the overall economy. It will impact the capacity in the industry, and which will end up again driving up the prices. And businesses will need some support from the government as well in terms of getting more relief measures, and so we can also be a part of controlling the inflation. So on our end, what we are doing right now is we are optimizing the routes and working along with the shippers and negotiating and seeing where we can share those prices. Share the impacts and share the burden.
Well, Gurbir, thanks for your time this morning. Really appreciate it.
Okay, thanks.
That is Gurbir Boparai. He's the Director of Canadian Prairie Transport here in Manitoba. And if you have any thoughts on what you're seeing in the grocery store in terms of prices, what items are you seeing go up the most? What's impacting you the most in terms of food prices? We'd love to hear from you. You can give us a call on our listener line, 204-788-3205. That's 204-788-3205. Well, next up here on Information Radio, we got some music for you from Roblin's Austin Ryder. Here he is now with Chances Are. And you can catch him at Dauphin's Country Fest on June 26th.
You see her there through the crowd, she can't help but stand out. One look steals your breath away. The whole world stands still, thinking this can't be real. Your mind's racing for the right words to say. You're asking yourself, is she out of your league? Why would she ever want a boy like me? On the edge, about to take the lead. Chances are she's here with someone else, or she could be here by herself, waiting for a guy like you to come along. Chances are it's not the right time now, where everything you wanted might work out. Dreams just fall in place where they belong. They say some shots aren't worth taking in the dark, but chances are you just knew she was the one since your story begun. Hand in your pocket, reaching for that ring. You're shaking, she's waiting, already got her daddy's blessing. Now you find yourself on bended knee, asking, baby, will you marry me? Chances are there's a better man out there, or maybe you're the answer to her prayers. A guy like you someday will come along. Chances are it's not the right time now, where everything you wanted might work out. Dreams just fall in place where they belong. They say some shots aren't worth taking in the dark, but chances are.
That's Robin's own Austin Ryder with the single Chances Are. And if you're already dreaming about summer, which I know a lot of people probably are today just to escape what's going on outside, he's playing at Dauphin's Country Fest on June 26th. Well, 7:25 right now here on Information Radio. And let's check in with Scott Reguer with a look at morning sports. Hello.
Hey, Corey.
So let's start with hockey here. Busy time in hockey.
Yes, it is indeed, and including the Jets' final game of this, lost NHL season. They'll host the San Jose Sharks and then set to preparing for next year, I suppose. And to that end, I mean, they do have they don't want to win tonight, I think. They don't want to catch Florida and drop in the draft lottery ladder. Right now, they have about a 3% chance of getting the first overall pick. That would be nice, but that is also a long shot, to say the least. As for the other Canadian teams, there are three that will participate in the playoffs, those being Montreal, Ottawa, and Edmonton. We still don't know, Corey, who Edmonton will face in the first round. It depends on what happens tonight. But the worst-case scenario would see them face Colorado. That would not be good for them. And the best-case scenario would see them host a series against either LA or Anaheim. So that's the lay in the NHL. As for the PWHL, Montreal's the lone Canadian team to clinch a spot in the playoffs. Ottawa and Toronto are busy duking it out for the final spot. Toronto coach, after a loss last night to New York, that's Troy Ryan, was asked whether he is scoreboard watching with a few games left to play.
Worry wouldn't be the word I would use. I'm aware. Like I would watch those. I think you're crazy if you don't. I mean, 3 or 4 games and everybody's tied, and it means a lot to make the playoffs. So we were in complete control of our own destiny. Now it's a little bit more of a mixed bag, trying to sort it out.
Yeah, win over Ottawa Saturday. We'll have the Scepters right back in the playoff mix.
Let's head now from the rink to the links and some potentially big news in golf.
For sure. There are questions, Corey, right now over whether the LIV Tour is on its last legs. This after reports yesterday by the Financial Times and others that LIV's backer, the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia, is on the verge of ending its support. LIV's CEO, Scott O'Neill, sought to quell speculation about the league's financial future yesterday, saying to reporters, things are going full throttle. LIV also promoted its Mexican event going on right now on social media with the message, slow news day? We are on. Well, Golf Channel analyst Eamon Lynch is among those not buying that.
LIV, its CEO and its players do not know what the strategic thinking of the Public Investment Fund is. They are not part of those conversations. They are clearly not part of the direction. And a coy social media post isn't going to disguise the stench of a rotting corpse here. They don't know what their future is.
The Saudi Public Investment Fund, Corey, has already spent around $5 billion on this league, wooing stars like Bryson DeChambeau, Brooks Koepka, and Jon Rahm away from the PGA. Koepka became the first high-profile player to return to the PGA Tour back in January. Perhaps he saw the financial writing on the wall.
Well, let's finish here with footy now and an entertaining day in the European Champions League.
Diaz, he has a shot, and it is a magnificent shot. It could be a match-winning.
The sound of Luis Diaz with the late goal, Corey, that helped Bayern Munich beat Real Madrid and claim a spot in the Champions League semifinals, which means, among other things, Canadian Alphonso Davies, who played most of the match yesterday for Bayern, is on track to win the sport's most important club tournament for a second time in his career. Alphonso Davies, part of Bayern's championship side back in 2020.
Well, Scott, thank you very much.
You betcha.
That is Scott Reguer with your morning sports. Stay tuned here on Information Radio. Still to come, his family moved from Syria. He worked multiple jobs, starting from grade 9 and volunteered as much as he could. And now he's the winner of the prestigious Loran Scholarship worth $100,000. He joins us in studio to tell us his story coming up after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 7:30. It's chilly. It's -7 right now. We are under a special weather statement in southern Manitoba this morning. Snow is the story, and it's especially being felt already this morning in places like Minnedosa, Dauphin, Roblin, Russell. Those areas will see the most of it. But for Winnipeg, We are expecting a risk of freezing rain later today, a windy high of 0, and then snow expected to begin after midnight. A Winnipeg youth outreach group is warning of toxic drugs after a recent rash of deaths. Resource Assistance for Youth says in the past 2 weeks, 5 people have died after using drugs. Executive Director Kate Schoberg says it is a moment of tremendous loss.
For participants, it's a loss of a loved one that helped them stay safe at different times in their lives and helps them get through very tough situations. And then, of course, for staff, there's the impact of grief.
Schoberg says changes to the drug supply have made it more toxic and unpredictable, and that includes the introduction of an animal tranquilizer. People in Peguis First Nation are still waiting and watching, preparing for potentially devastating spring flooding again. Runoff is expected soon on nearby rivers in the Interlake. More than 200 homes are at risk in a community that has seen major floods time and time again. Melvin Spence has lived through many of them and says the damage can last years.
I'm staying in a condemned house. It condemned twice. I got sick too from breathing that mold. Now I got to take buffers down there. It's bad. It's sickening.
Indigenous Services Canada says it is working with Peguis to find a long-term solution to the chronic flooding. Meanwhile, the Canadian Red Cross says it has crews in Peguis now helping build flood barriers and provide supplies. City of Winnipeg staff are advising against moving ahead with a managed encampment for people experiencing homelessness. A new report says setting up a supervised site would require significant resources and could take away from other efforts already underway. The cost of round-the-clock staffing for a 5-month pilot could rise to more than $1 million, depending on the size. And the report also notes the province is focused on expanding housing through its Your Way Home strategy. Marion Willis at St. Boniface Street Links was among those pushing the idea of a managed encampment.
A lot of this is politics over people. I don't know how bad it has to get in the city before the mayor realizes that the politicians are not the true experts here and that maybe they should be looking to some of us that actually have our feet on the ground in the trenches.
City Council's Executive Policy Committee is set to discuss the report next week. A 45-year-old woman faces an assault charge after a nurse was punched at the hospital in the paw. RCMP were called to St. Anthony's General Hospital Sunday. Police say the nurse suffered minor injuries. Darlene Jackson heads the Manitoba Nurses Union.
Violence in healthcare is a huge issue. We're seeing nurses yelled at, spit at, having things thrown at them, punched, all the time in this province. And it seems that it's getting more common, but even more frightening is that it's almost like it's accepted now.
The Northern Health Region says it is committed to having safe and respectful facilities. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says a wave of Russian airstrikes has killed at least 16 people, injuring dozens more. Kyiv's air defense system intercepting a missile over the capital. The mayor says 4 people were killed there, including a 12-year-old boy. In Odessa, officials say at least 7 others died in the overnight attacks. Ukrainian authorities say Russia launched more than 700 missiles and drones. Meanwhile, Russia says Ukraine launched a cross-border attack that killed 2 children. U.S. President Donald Trump says the leaders of Israel and Lebanon are set to speak today about a ceasefire. In a post on social media, Trump claims the Israeli and Lebanese leaders will hold their first direct talks in decades. However, officials in Beirut say they have no information on any such call. You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. Tackling retail theft in Brandon. A downtown business owner says his staff is trained to watch for shoplifters. Neil Crystal at the New System store says he's lost revenue to retail theft, and he's not alone. Crystal says retail theft is something businesses have to worry about every day.
We try to keep our lines of sight open throughout the store. We have staff, more staff than an average retail store for the size, and we try to train them to keep their eye out.
The Brandon Chamber of Commerce says city businesses have seen a 40% increase in shoplifting. That's why it wants business owners, police, and government to support a public safety unit to crack down on shoplifting. You can find the latest news updated throughout the day. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
That's Heather Wells at your CBC News desk. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1. I'm Corey Funk, in for Marcy Marcusa. And yes, it is April, just in case you were looking at your forecast, particularly if you're in western Manitoba right now. That snow is coming down, and potentially even some freezing rain. Those highway conditions are deteriorating. We'll get some more details on that shortly. But let's check in with Abby Adeyemi with a look at that special weather statement that we're
Yes, that freezing rain you're talking about is already coming down in the Brandon area, so it's sweeping our way already. We should be getting it around the noon lunch break period in the city later. Hence, this weather statement we have in effect for much of southern Manitoba this morning. It's going to bring the winter storm that's going to come with freezing rain. Some areas will even get heavy snow into Friday. Looking at the western and central areas, we're talking about adding on top of what you've already received overnight in the Dauphin area. You should be getting about 15 centimeters of snow, adding that together for Friday. Winnipeg right now, -7 at the Forks and at the airport. Cloudy skies, windy gust from the north. We should see morning temperatures stay around -6, -7 before we get to a high of 0 today, though we have that good chance of freezing rain starting in the afternoon. For the southern regions, in the Pembina Valley region towards Port Laperia at this time, we're looking at temperatures around -6, also cloudy there. A slim chance of showers coming your way. You warm up to 4 later in the day. Now, for Brandon and nearby areas, you have freezing drizzle at this time, -8. We're anticipating 2 to 4 centimeters of snow for that part of the Westman region once the system sweeps through. Then we talk about the Parkland region, Dauphin towards Russell, -10 at this time. You're still getting this light snow. We're looking at about 5 to 10 centimeters added to what you have on the ground already. Now, for the Interlake region, Gimli nearby, -8, cloudy. A good chance of snow coming your way. The Power Flin Flon, we're seeing temperatures around -17, -19. Sunny conditions there. You warm to -4 later. Thompson, Lynn Lake and Gillam. This region is mostly cloudy between -17 and -23. Your highs will be close to -6. While for Lynn Lake, we're seeing cloudy conditions there. Highs would get to -9, but the wind chill feels like -31 this morning. Actual temperature there, -23. Churchill and the York region, current conditions, we're seeing light snow in that part of the province, -15 at this time. You only get to -10 later. The wind chill really noticeable in the Churchill region. So we're looking at this late season blast, ice and snow in the south, while the north sunny but still cold. For the city, expect a windy high of 0. Current temperatures around -7 now, and freezing rain coming during your lunch break.
Thank you very much, Abby.
Thank you.
That's Abby Adeyemi with your weather. And Sierra Sanders, what's going on with the commute?
It is still the tale of the highways here, Corey, especially out west. We are still seeing those highways kind of deteriorating as the morning rolls on. The plows are out, though, so you want to be aware of that. I'll get into these highways that we're seeing being affected. So most of the highways north of Highway 1 there from Brandon are being reported as either covered with snow or partially covered. Highways around Shoal Lake being reported as partly covered, and now seeing highways around Minnedosa being reported as covered. So you want to be aware of that, and as well heading up north towards Riding Mountain National Park, seeing those highways being reported as covered too. St. Lazare, as we know, has buses that have been canceled, and because those highways are starting to deteriorate as well. So you want to make sure you are checking Manitoba 511 if you are out in that area, or if you are heading out into that area on those highways. And then looking up north, we're still seeing highways around the Paw, Cranberry Portage, Flin Flon being reported as covered with reduced visibility. And then north of Grand Rapids, highways are being reported as partly covered with reduced visibility. I actually took a quick look at one of the traffic cameras around Minnedosa on Highway 10 there. It is looking pretty snowy. It looks like it's mid-February and not mid-April. So the conditions are definitely changing here in out west at least. If there is something that is getting in your way, or you are in those areas, you want to let me know about something, give me a call. That number is 204-788-3093.
Thank you very much, Sierra. That's our studio director, Sierra Sanders. Well, up next here on Information Radio, Yusuf El Mohammed has just won a scholarship worth $100,000. The 18-year-old Winnipegger is one of 36 award winners among the 5,000 applicants nationwide. And he came to Canada after fleeing the war in Syria, and he's going to the University of Manitoba this fall. And he joins us in studio to talk about all of his achievements this morning. Hello.
Hi, how you doing?
Good, good. So actually, I want to rewind. So your family came here from Syria just 3 years ago, and you didn't speak any English. Could you imagine, like when you came here 3 years ago, did you imagine yourself being here with $100,000 scholarship, going to a Canadian university, where you are now?
Not at all. Since I came to Canada, I had the language barrier between me and the public. So I just like go around, see people talk, and I don't understand anything. But I mean, with practicing more at home and learning from my friends, I was able to at least be where am I at now. And my English fortunately got better than what it used to be before. And gladly, I'm the first one like to get a scholarship in my household.
What was that moment like? Where were you? How was it was it an envelope you opened up, an email when you got the scholarship? How take me to that moment.
It was a call. I was at home with my family. Like we had a group chat with the finalists from Lorraine. There was like 90 plus people on the group chat. All of the people just say, "Oh, we got rejected. And I was next like to them. After they get a call, they call me and they told me, Yusuf. And I was so shaking. They told me, we have a great news for you, and you got the scholarship. My parents started crying, and also my sister was crying. It was a fantastic moment.
Wow. Yeah, what does the scholarship mean to you and your family? Because I imagine does it feel like a team effort?
It actually does. It's like just accomplished that we made as a family. My family like went through a lot of bad thing in the war. After the war, we lost some people in the war, and yeah, I mean, ever since we look at the scholarship, I mean, we're very grateful.
Tell me a little bit about your journey to Canada, as much as you're willing to say about your experience in Syria and what brought you here.
Yeah, since the war began in my country, Syria, we went to Lebanon as a refugee. We faced a lot. Some racism in the school. It wasn't like looking too great for us as a refugee. And then we planned to come to Canada. And I mean, life is better here than what it used to be before.
And you actually, since coming to Canada, you've done a lot of volunteering, I think, which probably helped boost your resume, I'm guessing. One of the things you actually did, you started a newcomer club in your school. Tell me about that.
Yes. So as a newcomer, I mean, we faced a lot of struggles here in country and also in school. There was like the language barrier. I didn't want to the other students like have the same thing that I went through. I don't want it to be struggle with the school academic, with the school system. So I initiated this club to help students out.
Do you want to give a shout out to anyone at your school, anyone who helped you get here at all?
Of course, yeah. I will just give a shout out to my teachers, to Mr. North, the guidance counselor, and Ms. Donald.
Which school do you go to, by the way?
Churchill High School.
Okay, great. And that's not the only place that your kind of volunteer thing. You actually volunteer at the St. Boniface Hospital's gift shop as well. Why did you want to volunteer there?
I just wanted to get volunteer in the healthcare system because I wanted to be a doctor. So I thought that was like a good idea to do it, and it was fantastic.
Yeah, what's your experience like being at the gift shop? What kind of who's coming in and out, and what have you learned from volunteering there?
Yeah, a lot of patients come to the gift shop. Some of the people just came to visit for other patients. I mean, we try to make the atmosphere good for them and more lovely, so they don't feel sad or they feel in pain. And yeah, I mean, I was like 2 days in the volunteer shop, and like the other week they give me another person to train him, and it was so quickly. And then I think the other guy is still in the gift shop.
So now your plan is to go to U of M this fall. Like you said, you want to be a doctor, so I guess you're going to do kind of pre-med sort of stuff. What else do you hope to do? Are you still going to be volunteering at the gift shop?
I already done my volunteer at the gift shop, but I'm still doing volunteers in my school, and I would be more interested to apply in other volunteer shifts.
Okay, and what else is next for you after winning this award? Where else? What are you hoping to achieve?
Well, I would like to learn about the worlds and stay involved in all the communities that I go to. Since I won the scholarship, I got like 3 summers to go to travel anywhere in the world and learn the culture and stay involved in the community by any means.
And what kind of medicine do you hope to eventually practice?
Pediatric.
Okay, why that?
I love to work with kids because I volunteered with kids in my school. I'm like the mentors on grade 7s, and I also had one volunteer shift in a school in elementary school.
Okay, that's great. Well, Yusuf, congratulations! Wonderful achievement, and look forward to seeing what you achieve in the future with the scholarship.
Thank you very much.
That is Yusuf El Mohammed. He's a Loran Scholar Foundation Award winner. He's one of 3 Manitobans who have won a scholarship worth $100,000.
On This is Manitoba, we celebrate who we are, and we lean into the challenges here that can make this place even better. I'm Marcy Marcusa, host of This is Manitoba. On the podcast, we tackle one topic in a new episode every Friday. It's always about us, the news, and the people here. Get into some local listening. Find and follow This is Manitoba wherever you get your podcasts.
7:46 right now, and up next here on Information Radio, Canada Reads 2026 is coming to a close. And over the past week, 5 celebrated Canadians have championed the book they think all of Canada should read. And now only 2 books remain on the table, with the finale happening later today. Now, we won't spoil anything yet. And if you want to catch up on the action, you can at cbcbooks.ca. Here's a little taste of what went down yesterday when panelists Morgan Book and Steve Dangle Glynn went head-to-head. Morgan, one of Canada's biggest book content creators, is championing the romance novel It's Different This Time by Joss Richard. And Steve, who's a sports podcaster, is backing the book Searching for Terry Punchout by Tyler Hellard. Here's a bit of their discussion about how family dynamics play out in their respective novels.
I loved the parental relationships in all of these, and I found myself intrigued with all of them. I wanted more with Adam and Terry, just a bit, even 50 more pages in that book. But I think I found myself most intrigued with June and her mom relationship. I have a great relationship with my parents, and yet through Joss Richard's writing, I was feeling what June was feeling. I was feeling so angry for her on behalf of her mom. She got flares of PTSD when she got her mom's voicemail and she heard her voice. She struggled, she bought that ticket for her mom to come see her in Les Mis, knowing that she probably wasn't going to show up. And that was something that I have never experienced in my life. My parents are there. My parents are probably watching right now. And through the writing, I just, never having experienced that in my life, I was still very clearly feeling what June was feeling. And I was very intrigued with that.
You were chomping at the bit, Steve. We have 30 seconds for this round.
Well, welcome to the emotional constipation of a father-son relationship. So you wanted more? So many fathers and so many sons have that relationship. So when I read it, I was like, oh, that's actually a really good depiction of fathers and sons, in that it is very unsatisfying. They have an unsatisfying relationship, and that's them slowly trying to fix it. With June and her mom, at the end, it felt like paying off a debt of $5. Like it was paying off a debt that never really accumulated. I wanted to learn more about their relationship throughout the book, and then it just sort of, here it is, here's a resolution, and it's over.
That was Canada Reads panelists Morgan Book and Steve Dangle Glynn talking about the novels Searching for Terry Punchout by Tyler Hellard and It's Different This Time by Joss Richard. Now, today is the Canada Reads finale, and you can watch the debates on YouTube, CBC Gem, and the CBC Books website to find out which book will be crowned the one book all Canada should read. And for all the info, you can go to cbcbooks.ca. And we do have a bag of Canada Reads books to give away. And all you got to do, you just got to email us, and we're going to choose a winner at random. It's all the books. You can email us win@cbc.ca with the subject line Canada Reads. That's win@cbc.ca for your chance to win. We will announce the winners tomorrow. Well, next up here on Information Radio, kids skipping school continues to be an issue in Manitoba. Last month, CBC reported that over 15,000 students were chronically absent in the 2023-2024 academic year. And in Ontario, only 40% of students attended classes 90% of the time in 2024. So that's why Ontario's education minister is proposing a change to the English public school system. If passed, it would tie school attendance to final marks of high school students, meaning it could possibly count for up to 15% of a kid's grades. Now, is this the right approach, and could this work here? Well, our next guest will give us some insight. They've both seen why some kids don't go to school. Kent Duick is the founder of Inner City Youth Alive, and Mallory Pledger is the program director there as well. Welcome to you both.
Thank you. Good you had us.
Yes. So I'll start with you, Ken. So what do you make of this proposal linking school attendance to grades?
Well, I think that it's a creative approach for sure, and I'm glad that they're sort of thinking outside of the box. And I think that it's going to work for some students. But what we found is that there's still a group of students that are almost, it's almost invisible. And so those students are going to have a hard time. It's not going to be that will be the silver bullet that will then get them to school. For some kids, that might motivate them, but by and large, that's really not going to address the core of the problem.
Well, I imagine a lot of kids who don't go to school, necessarily grades isn't necessarily their big motivator in the first place, I'm guessing, right? For you, Mallory, we just heard Kent say there's these students who are invisible, like you said. So what are the social factors that are motivating them to not be going to school?
Well, in our experience, what we found is that when students aren't going to school, there are several complex layered barriers that are preventing them from being in the classroom. So oftentimes, there's family dynamics at home. There are socioeconomic factors like food insecurity, unstable housing, poverty, trauma-related issues that are preventing students from being there. And without those being addressed, we don't get to the root cause. And so, like Kent is saying, some of these things, asking kids to show up for marks, I think is going to be more of a deterrent than anything. It's, why bother, I think.
So you don't think it's something Manitoba should consider then? Or what about you, Kent? I know it's okay to have different views, even though you're from the same organization. It's okay.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think it's a deterrent as well, because what these kids, there's this idea, I've read in some research a while back, it says that these are kids upon whom society has placed too great a burden. So we're placing greater burdens on these kids in terms of their success. So what we hear from kids is they just feel so discouraged that they don't even want to try. And now there's another carrot that's sort of dangled out there, but it's out of reach. Mm-hmm. And so for those kids, they feel like they can't succeed at school. And now that's going to be another way that proves to themselves that they can't succeed. So I think, again, I don't want to discourage creativity and ingenuity, but I just don't think that this is going to be what we think it is. It's not a silver bullet. Mm-hmm. Same thing here provincially. We're offering food programs, and these are being touted as kind of what will do it. It won't. Mm-hmm. For a lot of the kids, it'll be great. But for the kids that we're working with, it's not going to be enough. It's wonderful, but it's not enough.
So that leaves the question, what will? I'll start with you, Mallory. What do you think?
Well, what we found is that outreach is really the key. So again, talking about addressing those root causes, kids need to feel safety and they need to feel value before they can take that next step in, integrating back into the school system. They need to feel like they can trust their educators, that they can trust the system before they start making steps towards the classroom. That's going to be key.
Is there any success stories that stand out to you of a student who was not going and then now they are, and what got them there?
Yeah, we've got many stories like that. We often like to share the story of one of our students, Leland, who he wasn't in school for 2 years, wasn't even registered. stayed at home, was helping out, played video games. He didn't think much of it. And when our outreach team connected with him, and they started to pour into him and see what his strengths were and encourage him, he started going to school. He started encouraging his friends to go to school. And now he's getting ready to graduate, and he's looking to go into graphic design. He's looking at colleges, and he's a really great example of what happens when kids start to believe and they see value in themselves and value in education.
And you know, that's just a short anecdote, but how much time and resources did it take from you to get him to that point? Was there a lot of checking in throughout the process? Was there days he skipped and you had to kind of, hey, like get back over there kind of thing? What did that look like? And you know, from say this, there's a policymaker listening right now thinking like, how do we do this on a larger scale for all Manitoban kids? What kind of things should people glean from Leland's story?
Yeah, absolutely. It takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, and so we've got several full-time staff who are dedicated to reaching out to kids, and that's their sole job, outreach and mentorship to kids. They provide tutoring and academic support, of course, but that primary task is to create a relationship, a safety in relationship for those kids. And so it does take time. We found that, one staff member can reach out to 25 kids. That's the magic sauce without, staff being overburdened and still being able to give time to students.
And is something that could be repeated, you think, from a provincial perspective, like either through funding certain positions, things like that? I don't know, Kent or Melly, what do you think that could look like? Yeah, I mean, we're pushing on the issue of outreach. We sort of feel like we found the one thing. It would be kind of the equivalent of if you said to a firefighter, you have to fight fires, but you can't use water. It's the secret sauce is outreach, and it's complex. It's trauma-informed outreach. It's people that are going into homes, are doing the journey, are meeting the whole family, because we think of education often as that one kid, because that's how funding works. If you get that one kid sitting in a seat, you get the funding, but it's a whole family that has to buy into the system. So we can create kind of push factors from the home, where the family is pushing and supporting, and the school is building systems that pull. So we have that symbiotic kind of connection. So does that look like more funding for nonprofits like yourself, or is that something that the province, you think, could do within the education system itself? Educators would have to turn their thinking on end. They'd have to understand that they have to meet kids where they are, not where they would like them to be. What I've found in the 11 years I've been working on this problem is that schools are very good at rearranging things internally and doing whatever they can to be sort of magnetic and attractive. But it's definitely, if you can't think that you're going to go out of the walls, you're going to meet kids where they are, and you're going to work with them from that place. You have to not be afraid of the community. You have to love the community and love the kids in the community, and then actively engage with families. Well, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you both for your insights. I really appreciate it. All the best. That is Kent Duick. He's the founder of Inner City Youth Alive. Also, Mallory Pledger is the program director at Inner City Youth Alive. Let's check in with Heather Wells with a quick look at news headlines.
Well, Winnipeggers who use drugs are being urged to test them after a recent rash of deaths. Resource Assistance for Youth says in the past 2 weeks, 5 people have died after using drugs. The executive director says changes to the drug supply have made it more toxic and unpredictable. And people in Peguis are still waiting and watching, preparing for potentially devastating spring floods again. One man says he has lived through many floods and the damage can last for years. We'll hear from him in our next local news at 8:30.
Thank you very much, Heather. Stay tuned. Coming up after 8, we're going to check in with reporters across the province as well as the RCMP and get a fulsome forecast for this weather statement that's affecting southern Manitoba. Stay tuned. We'll be back after World Reports.
Canada Reads 2026. 5 perceptive panelists, 5 blockbuster books, 4 days of smart and sassy deliberation and debate. But there can only be one winner. Ali Hassan hosts Canada's favorite book battle, Canada Reads 2026. One book to build bridges. All this week on radio, TV, the Listen app, and on CBC Jam. For more, go to cbcbooks.ca. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, It's The Current with Matt Galloway.
Reality television has dominated our screens for decades now, but after abuse allegations against one star, there are calls to prioritize the mental health of cast members over the train wreck appeal of the programs. That's coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm John Northcott. U.S. President Donald Trump says the leaders of Israel and Lebanon will speak directly today. But there are major questions this morning about whether that call will actually happen. A statement from the Lebanese presidency makes no mention of any contact with Israel. It confirms only that President Joseph Aoun spoke with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Tom Perry is following the latest from Jerusalem. Tom, Trump is talking up an historic phone call today, but is Lebanon actually on board?
Well, last night we did hear from U.S. President Donald Trump. He posted a message on Truth Social. That's his social media platform. He said, we're trying to get a little breathing room between Israel and Lebanon. It's been a long time since the two leaders have spoken, 34 years. It will happen tomorrow. So Donald Trump saying that the two leaders, the Prime Minister of Israel and the President of Lebanon, would speak today. Today we heard from an official in the office of Lebanon's president saying they were unaware of any upcoming contacts between Lebanon and Israel. And we've now heard from the Lebanese government that President Joseph Aoun did speak with the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio today, but we're hearing as well from sources in the Lebanese government that the president is refusing to speak with Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, at the same time stressing the need for a ceasefire before any talks take place. Nothing is settled. The Israeli campaign against Hezbollah in Lebanon continues. And whether or not this conversation between the Lebanese president and the Israeli prime minister actually takes place seems very much in doubt.
Meanwhile, Tom, Pakistan says there is progress on talks between Washington and Tehran, but how much of a factor is any ceasefire in Lebanon to that success?
Well, it is a factor. Pakistan has been trying to broker this peace deal between the U.S. And Iran. It worked on getting the current 2-week ceasefire. It's trying to at least extend that, maybe bring an end to this conflict. We've been seeing a lot of reports coming out of Islamabad, quoting the foreign ministry of Pakistan, a number of statements coming out today saying that the U.S. and Iran are willing to hold talks, that the process is continuing, though no dates or venue for further talks have been determined, talking about the nuclear issue, Iran's nuclear program, but also that peace in Lebanon, where Israel's carrying out its military campaign, that's going to be essential for peace talks between the U.S. and Iran.
The CBC's Tom Perry in Jerusalem. Thanks so much, Tom.
Thank you.
Pope Leo is blasting world leaders for spending billions of dollars on war. He's currently visiting a number of African states and said this to a gathering in Cameroon.
The world is being ravaged by a handful of tyrants, yet is held together by a multitude of supportive brothers and sisters. They are the descendants of Abraham, as numerous as the stars in the sky and the grains of sand on the seashore.
His comments come as the Trump administration continues to criticize the pontiff and his outspoken opposition to the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran. Leo's stance is being supported by the Archbishop of Canterbury. Sarah Mullally says the Pope's calls for peace are courageous. A veteran Canadian military police officer is suing Ottawa and U.S. gunmaker Sig Sauer. He alleges his new pistol fired without the trigger being pulled, and the injuries he sustained ended his career. As Murray Brewster reports, there have been similar concerns with the weapon in the U.S.
I'd known that there'd been issues, but I didn't know to the extent until after my injury.
After spending most of his career shooting a Second World War-era Browning 9mm pistol, military police officer, Master Warrant Officer Jamie Delorier says he was just excited to have a new gun. That was until his brand new C-22 went off unexpectedly as he was unholstering it, wounding him in the foot and effectively ending his military career. It was only during his convalescence that he read about all of the lawsuits and injuries in the U.S. related to the pistol and how a Canadian Special Forces soldier was wounded 5 years ago before the federal government bought the weapon for the entire military.
This weapon is flawed. I was extremely angry with the fact that we procured this weapon.
Delorier is now suing the federal government and Sig Sauer, the U.S. manufacturer, claiming that the gun is defective and fires without a trigger pull. His lawyer is Lane Foster.
We think that Sig Sauer needs to take
some responsibility for what's happening instead of continuing to point towards user error.
What's also significant about this case is just last year, DND told CBC News there had been no accidental misfires or injuries related to the rollout of the new weapons. DND declined comment about this case, saying it's before the courts. Sig Sauer also did not respond to requests for comment. Murray Brewster, CBC News, Ottawa.
Imperial Oil is apologizing for a pipeline spill near Cold Lake, Alberta. The company says more than 840,000 liters of a substance called bitumen emulsion spilled last week. The spill has now been stopped and contained. Cleanup and remediation efforts are underway. Alberta's energy regulator says so far no impacts to wildlife or bodies of water have been identified. The Canadian real estate market may be slowing down even more. The latest projection from the Canadian Real Estate Association is out, and it says forget about earlier predictions the real estate market might heat up. Anissa Dari explains.
At an open house in the Greater Toronto area, this realtor's job might be a bit tougher these days, and that's backed up by the latest projections from the Canadian Real Estate Association. It's downgrading its forecast for the housing market in this country.
Definitely a quieter spring than we had been expecting not so long ago.
Sean Cathcart is senior economist with the association in Ottawa. He says they're now projecting fewer home sales and lower prices for 2026, in part because fixed mortgage rates are higher.
So our current forecast has a lot of those buyers going back to the sidelines to see if those rates are going to come back down.
The Real Estate Association's national average home price for this year is now projected to be nearly $10,000 less than they were estimating just a few months ago, with provinces like BC, Alberta, and Ontario forecast for, quote, virtually no growth. Sean Cathcart says on top of higher mortgages, many sellers don't want to drop their prices.
And until you have a situation like a recession or really massive job losses or something, then people are just not going to be inclined to sell for a price that they don't agree to.
And all these stainless steel appliances with
the next forecast isn't until July, well into the summer, which would normally be a busier time for home sales. Anissa Dari, CBC News, Calgary.
Flooding is forcing several Ontario communities to declare a state of emergency. Heavy rains and fast-melting snowpack have led to warnings across Ontario and Quebec, with regions around Lake Huron particularly hard hit. Marion Sontag owns a fishing lodge in the northern Ontario community of Willisville. She says the water rose so fast they couldn't keep up.
At our deepest point right now in our parking lot, it's up to your chest. So even chest waders are going to be, I'm not sure they're going to be enough. We had, a neighbor come and was driving through our parking lot in his boat.
Environment Canada expects temperatures to stay above freezing with more rain in the forecast this week. And finally, a stunning admission from the Canada Revenue Agency, coming just as tax season hits full swing. CBC's The Fifth Estate has learned the CRA mistakenly approved a $5 million refund to a BC businesswoman last year, even though her tax return was allegedly riddled with false information. Daniel LeBlanc has the story.
Is it someone trying to fraud the CRA, or is it just someone that doesn't know how to file?
Raphael Clément is an expert in Canadian tax law, but he's never seen anything like the court dispute between the Canada Revenue Agency and BC businesswoman Teresa Wallace. In a tax return submitted in 2024, she claimed $10 million in new revenues, on which she said she'd paid the exact same amount in taxes. As a result, she sought and received a $5 million refund after her file was reviewed by 2 CRA officials.
How is it possible that she was able to get the refund even with those forms that are clearly there is something going on that is not proper?
The CRA reviewed the case a third time and finally determined she had submitted allegedly falsified information. The agency obtained an emergency order earlier this year from the federal court to freeze Wallace's assets. With $4.2 million still in her accounts, Wallace told the court she did not attempt to liquidate the funds and is seeking access to her bank accounts to resume regular business operations. Insiders and experts argue it would be much easier if the CRA learned from past mistakes and didn't authorize this type of refund in the first place. The Conservative Party's revenue critic Gérard Dettel said the CRA should focus its energies on big files rather than nickel and diming regular taxpayers.
In the last 10 years, we have seen a lack of leadership and seriousness at the CRA.
The CRA said that it cannot comment on individual tax cases, but insisted it's continuously adapting its safeguards to address evolving risks. Daniel Leblanc, CBC News, Ottawa.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. Remember, for news anytime, go to our website, cbcnews.ca. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Manitoba YouTube page. I'm Corey Funk, in for Marcy Marcusa. Well, hope you had a nice spring yesterday. Welcome back to winter. This half hour on the show, we're taking you on an informative tour across the province as Old Man Winter makes his last hurrah. Hopefully. Southern Manitoba is under a special weather statement where we'll get a fulsome forecast from our CBC weather specialist, Riley Lachuk. We're also going to check in with the RCMP on your current highway conditions, which are deteriorating in the west as we speak. We're going to head to Brandon, which is already experiencing this system, and check in with our reporter there. We're going to head up north, actually, after that to Flin Flon, which got walloped yesterday by some spring snow. And finally, we're going to take you to Steinbach and hear how farmers in the area feel about this spring moisture. All that coming up right here on Information Radio. Up first, though, let's check in with Heather Wells with a look at news headlines.
Good morning. Well, 5 people have died after using drugs in just the first 2 weeks, prompting community groups to urge Winnipeggers who use drugs to test them. Resource Assistance for Youth Executive Director Kate Schoberg says changes to the drug supply have made it more toxic, more unpredictable. City of Winnipeg staff are advising against moving ahead with a managed encampment for people experiencing homelessness. A new report says setting up a supervised site would require significant resources and could take away from other efforts already underway. But Marion Willis at St. Boniface Street Links says politicians are not true experts and should be looking to those actually working in the trenches. We'll hear more from her in our next local news coming up at 8:30.
Thank you very much, Heather. Well, let's check in with those highways right now. Sierra Sanders has been keeping a look at that. What's going on?
Hi, Corey. It is still the tale of the highways out west. We are seeing highways out there kind of deteriorating as this weather system starts to move through the western part of the province. The number one from the Saskatchewan border to Brandon is still being reported as covered with snow by the Manitoba 511. And it's kind of all those highways north of Brandon and south of Russell there that are all kind of being reported as covered and partly covered. Highways around Shoal Lake are being reported as partly covered, as well as Oak River and Sioux Valley. And then in areas such as Foxwarren, St. Lazare, those areas are being reported as covered with snow. So you want to keep that in mind if you are heading out on the highways, especially up north there. We are seeing highways being reported as covered and partly covered with reduced visibility. So that is also a concern there. So just a reminder to check Manitoba 511 if that is on your agenda today to get out on those highways. I'm still taking phone calls, though, on the CBC commuter line. So if you're here in the city and there's something getting in your way or there's a backup, I'd love to know about it. As well, if you are in those areas that are being hit with this weather system, give me a call. That number is 204-788-3093.
Well, 8:13 right now, you're listening and you're watching Information Radio this morning. We're bringing you actually a special broadcast today on top of our AM and FM channels and our usual YouTube page. You can also watch us on CBC Manitoba's streaming channel. So welcome to all of you viewers out there. And of course, we're talking about the weather, which has put a bit of a damper on our province's fields, on our forests, on our roads, and our collective moods, I think, as well. And we're going to start off today's broadcast by checking in with Riley Lachuk, because we are under a special weather statement here. It is once again winter, even though it is spring, isn't it?
Hard to believe that, not even 12 hours ago, we were at like 9-10 degrees in Winnipeg, into the teens through the afternoon yesterday. And where have we come now? Well, down to about -7. in the city.
I know, it kind of hurts a bit.
Yeah, a bit of a rapid drop. I mean, it's spring, right? We're going through this transition, this tug of war between the seasons as we get into some warmer air. I mean, looking at some of the highway conditions, particularly in the west, that's where the system has pushed into already through the early morning hours this morning. I've been looking at some of the highway cameras, for example, around Minnedosa, looking at snow-covered. There's been some reduced visibility, some of that snow actually sticking to the highways, as we've seen some of that sort of melting on the highways first before it starts to stick and get a bit slick, and that's what we've seen into the Verdun area as well. And I'm just looking at some of the cameras this morning, and yep, it's underway in the west, and some of that will start to push eastward and northeastward as we get through the day.
Exciting. Well, so then what is ahead as we kind of move in through Winnipeg and later on today?
Yeah, so as we push forward through the day, this special weather statement remains in place as we get through the next, I would say for the bulk of the day, we'll see this in place for much of southern Manitoba here, including the city of Winnipeg. This is because of a couple of things. First off, the risk of freezing rain, and we've seen some of that developing south of the Trans-Canada through the early morning hours today that pushes eastward into the Red River Valley as we get through the morning hours today. North of the Trans-Canada, this is because, as we've seen, the likelihood and the possibility of some accumulating snow as we get through into the daytime hours today. So that freezing rain, quite patchy in nature right now. I'm looking at it pretty generally south of the Trans-Canada along highways 2, 3, pushing northeastward toward the city of Winnipeg. So I wouldn't be surprised if we did get into some precipitation, either some freezing rain or some light mixed precipitation as we get through the next couple of hours here. But north, where we have seen some of that cooler air in place, this has been more like that snow, particularly through the Riding Mountain region. Then this is the region where we could see 4 to 8 centimeters. Some of those higher elevations, particularly around the Duck, the Riding Mountains, this is where we could see the potential, at least, for up to 10, possibly even up to 15. Possible, I think, in the Riding Mountain area in particular as we get through the next 24 hours or so in the Red River Valley. Once we get through this period of mixed precipitation, this does transition over to some snow as we get into some of this cooler air. And in behind this, we'll start to see some snow falling as we get, not through the afternoon, but into the evening tonight, overnight into Friday morning.
And just quickly here, can you just give us a little bit of hope in the long-term forecast? And please tell us that winter is soon to be over?
Yeah, we have to cross this hump first. So we will get into a couple of cooler days here, certainly today, tomorrow into the early part of the weekend, things looking cooler than normal. Once we cross into early next week, then we start to cross over the bridge here and we get to the other side and things, I'm looking at double digits, even by the middle of next week, close to 20 degrees once again. So just give it a couple of days here. We'll get through this, and then there is some, I guess if you want to call it light at the end of the tunnel, bit of hope for us if you're really looking for some warmth here, Corey.
I'm not going to trust anything till May.
Yeah, that's fair. That's more than fair.
Well, Riley, thank you very much. That's our CBC weather specialist, Riley Laychuk. And as we heard from Riley, the system is bringing freezing rain to some Manitoba highways. So for a look at how the highways are looking, we're now joined by Sergeant Darcy Paul with the RCMP here in Manitoba. Good morning.
Good morning.
So what are you hearing about highway conditions right now?
Like you said, they are deteriorating to the west near the border, as well as the north around the Riding Mountains.
Okay. And what are you hearing in terms of, as things deteriorate, what are the possibilities? What things are you considering? Do you think any highways might close today at all?
We haven't received that information yet, but people just keep attention to the Manitoba 511 app. It has the road conditions, road closures. It has weather conditions, including radar, any snow plows, and sanding, the activities that may be out. And we do have on the app active live cameras at key locations on all the major highways.
Have you heard of any incidents at all out on the highway so far this morning?
Not that I've heard so far, at least not in the rural area.
Good to hear. And what's your message to drivers today as those highways get slippier?
Ensure that you have a plan for your driving well ahead of time. Ensure your vehicle's in good driving condition, including the regular service for your tires, windshield wipers, and fluid. There's also now electronic roadsides on the highways, major highways, advising and warning of the road conditions and road closures. Make sure that you have proper tires for this time of year. Check your tires for tread and wear to ensure they're safe. with water and snow on the highways. Hydroplaning is also a danger if you don't have adequate tread. You should carry an emergency road kit. This can be bought commercially through the CAA and big box stores. Includes a safety blanket, flashlight, and other items that may be of roadside assistance.
Sergeant Paul,
Yep.
thanks for your time this morning. Really appreciate it.
Okay, you're welcome.
That was Sergeant Darcy Paul with the RCMP here in Manitoba. Now, communities around the province are experiencing very different conditions. So now let's actually head to Brandon, where CBC reporter Michelle McDougall is standing by. Hi there, Michelle.
Good morning, Corey. How are you?
Good. How are you there in Brandon? What are things looking like where you are?
Well, it's cold, it's windy, and we did have freezing rain overnight. Within the city and the neighborhoods, the streets and parking lots and sidewalks are covered a white layer, kind of a skiff of snow. But so far, you can see the grass behind me is still brown. But when I stepped out this morning, I did the toe tap, because and it was a good thing because the freezing rain overnight. So now I am on the intersection on the corner of the Trans-Canada Highway and 18th Street, and right now traffic is moving well, but I'm looking at some of the vehicles coming in from the west, and they do have a little bit of snow cover on the roofs, and I can see, how some people don't scrape the windshields the whole way. We've got a lot of that going on too, Corey. So yeah, it's windy, it's cold. We've had the whole all the weather in the kitchen sink.
I imagine there's a few people who had their winter tires taken off this last week and are probably maybe regretting it this morning as well.
I would think so. And what's good, people seem to be driving with caution. You know how the first snowfall of the year and then the third and the fourth, that's pretty much what I'm seeing this morning.
I just got to check in too with you, Michelle, on the mood in Brandon. I know here in Winnipeg, I think a lot of people are feeling kind of socked in. You get that taste of spring, and all of a sudden this winter comes back. It feels like heavy on our shoulders.
And like you, I was wearing a T-shirt yesterday, so a little bit of a wallop. But I was out and about talking with folks yesterday. I spoke with a farmer. He does grain in the Elgin area, which is about 65 kilometers southwest of Brandon. And he said they need the moisture. So even though we complain, oh no, more snow, there are a lot of farmers who desperately need the snowpack for spring moisture.
Well, Michelle, thanks for your time this morning. Appreciate it. Stay warm out there.
You're welcome. Thanks.
That's Michelle McDougall. She's one of our CBC reporters based in Brandon. Thanks for joining us for special coverage here on Information Radio. I'd like to welcome anyone watching on YouTube and anywhere you stream CBC this morning. Well, if you were watching if you're streaming this morning, watching on YouTube or anywhere else, you could see the grass was brown in Brandon this morning, but we're going to actually head up north here right away where it looks nothing like spring at all. Eric Westhaver is our CBC reporter in Flin Flon. Good morning to you there, Eric.
Morning, y'all. How you guys doing?
Good. So just for radio listeners, anywhere else, just describe the scene where you are right now, what things are looking like.
Well, I mean, it's winter. It's very clearly still winter, and it especially feels like it after yesterday. I'm standing in Flin Flon, right in front of the famous Flinty statue here. Looked a little frigid yesterday because of a lot of blowing snow. About 20 centimeters of snow fell during the day. That wasn't necessarily the problem. The problem was the wind that came in from the northwest and blew it all over the place. Roads and highways weren't closed off. The schools were kept open, but it was still kind of a at your own risk sort of travel day. I know some people here in Flin Flon who were planning to go out of town for trips, planning to go out of town for different appointments, who decided, you know what, maybe we're going to hold off until later this week if we can. And that was the situation yesterday. And you can see here, still plenty of snow on the ground, still a lot of winter weather. But generally speaking, the weather here today is nice and the forecast is looking positive.
That's good. And I also wonder, maybe you heard Michelle and I complaining as a bunch of Southerners, it's below zero in April, it's cold, we're sad. What's the perspective like up north this morning? Is this just a regular, April in Flin Flon, or what are people feeling?
Same old, same old. This is a region where it's not unusual some years to see snowfall on May long weekend. So to have it show, maybe not quite like this is a little bit heavy, but snowfall in the spring and even getting towards the late spring is not all that uncommon here. This is a little unusual and it is a little annoying, but as Michelle said earlier regarding agriculture, moisture is not a bad thing to have in the soil. And up here after last summer, especially, I think people won't be complaining about having some moisture in the forests.
Yeah, you're talking about the fire potential. What is the mood around that for folks? How are they feeling? Going into because it's last year. It was only a couple of months until really the fire season really started in earnest. It started in May last year across Manitoba.
It did. It did. It started only 6 weeks on the calendar from where we're at today. It's kind of interesting to think of how this whole ground is just covered in snow. And then 6 weeks from now, last year, is when Flin Flon and several other communities were evacuated because of fire concerns. You would never know it looking at the ground here. But the honest idea that I've been hearing from a lot of people in Flin Flon and at different events over the last 24 hours, what I've been hearing is this is annoying, but we probably needed this as a region. It's been a very heavy at times snowfall winter, and honestly, there's been fear that that moisture from the snow won't be absorbed into the soil in the way that it needs to in order to have healthy trees, in order to have healthy fire conditions. So one day may not make all the difference, but it certainly will help.
Eric, thanks for your time this morning. All the best.
You too. Thank you.
That's Eric Westhaver, our CBC reporter in Flin Flon. Now, Riley, I do want to stay up north with you here right now. It's still extremely cold up north this morning. It's been below seasonal, obviously, down south here. But where does that stand for northerners in terms of the spring they've been having?
Yeah, so just looking at temperatures right now, minus 16 is the current reading in the Paw, minus 21 in Flin Flon. About the same for Flin Flon. I was actually just looking at some of the snowfall data when I was listening to Eric talking there and looking at some of the images out of Flin Flon there. Right now, at least at the Environment Canada station, there's about 20 centimeters of snow. There's about a 20 centimeter snowpack remaining on the ground there. So fairly healthy snowpack for the beginning of April. Usually for this time of the year, snowfall on the ground in northwestern parts of the province would be somewhere around there. The snow depth typically looking at, I'm just trying to pull up these stats here. There we go. Usually we would see about 13 centimeters of snow in parts of northwestern Manitoba in this part of April, at least. So fairly healthy snowpack. Like Eric was saying, this is actually fairly good news for the wildfire front. After a very dry year last year, some of this excess moisture, fairly good news for parts of northern Manitoba as we get spring off on sort of a more solid footing, I guess, as we go into April and May here and things start to dry out.
Well, thank you, Riley. Let's head back down south now. Jura Mickelraith is one of our CBC reporters in Steinbach. And actually, Jura, I understand things are looking pretty well. I'm looking right now. I see the clock tower in Steinbach right now behind you. Things are looking pretty bare. It looks fairly spring-like right now, at least.
Yeah, there's no snow here. There was not really a lot of snow on my commute from Oakbank. Definitely a lot colder and windier today than yesterday. I rode my motorcycle yesterday. I'm not doing that today. But yeah, people are feeling a little bit unhappy about the cold weather. I spoke to a group of men that were having breakfast at Main Street Bread and Butter here. I'm on Main Street right now. And they were a little bit unhappy about the cold weather and potential for snow. So yeah.
What about, I know we heard from Michelle earlier, the farmers in Western Manitoba at least say this moisture is much needed. What have you been hearing from the agricultural community around Steinbach?
It's a little bit of a different story here. I spoke to a farmer from Springfield, and because of the difference in the soil, it's a lot more clay heavy here. So it retains moisture more than the soilier sand out west. So the farmer that I spoke to this morning is also not looking forward to a lot of excess moisture. He does acknowledge that the Western farmers will probably appreciate it more, but there's still quite a bit of moisture here. Something to keep in mind, though, is colder temperatures are going to be a little bit of a bigger impact for farmers because the soil won't warm up as fast. And so planting is already looking a little bit delayed. Normally, they'd like to start end of April, but it's looking like it'll be beginning of May more likely. So yeah, any cold weather that is sustained is going to be just preventing them from planting even earlier.
Well, Jura, thanks for your time this morning. All the best in Steinbach.
Thank you.
That's Jura Mickelraith, our CBC Manitoba Steinbach reporter. Closing it off here with Riley, wind is something people need to keep an eye out for today.
Aside from the precipitation, that's the thing that we're going to have to watch through the afternoon. Already seeing gusts up to about 60 to 70 through parts of southwestern Manitoba. Expect gusts up to around 50 or so through the Red River Valley. So expect some very windy conditions as we get through the balance of the day.
Well, thank you very much, Riley.
You're welcome.
And thank you, everyone who was listening and watching today on our special broadcast of Information Radio this morning. Thanks to our CBC reporters, Michelle McDougall, Eric Westhaver, and Jura Mickelraith, as well as our weather specialist, Riley Lachuk.
At 8:30, -7 right now in Winnipeg. We are under that special weather statement. Snow not expected to arrive until overnight tonight into Friday. But for today, we do have a risk of freezing rain, windy high of 0. A Winnipeg youth outreach group is warning of toxic drugs after a recent rash of deaths. Resource Assistance for Youth says in the past 2 weeks, 5 people have died after using drugs. Executive Director Kate Schoberg says staff knew 4 of the people who died, including one who was only 19 years old. The other person lived in a Manitoba housing building they serve. She says the deaths have hit the community hard.
Many people that we serve have already lost people to the drug toxicity crisis. And so it's not just the loss of their best friend, it's a reminder of the other people that they've lost previously.
Schoberg says changes to the drug supply have made it more toxic and unpredictable. That includes the introduction of the animal tranquilizer medetomidine. City of Winnipeg staff are advising against moving ahead with a managed encampment for people experiencing homelessness. A new report says setting up a supervised site would require significant resources and could take away from other efforts already underway. The cost of round-the-clock staffing for a 5-month pilot could rise to more than $1 million, depending on the size. And the report also notes the province is focused on expanding housing through its Your Way Home strategy. Marion Willis at St. Boniface Street Links was among those pushing the idea of a managed encampment.
A lot of this is politics over people. I don't know how bad it has to get in the city before the mayor realizes that the politicians are not the true experts here and that maybe they should be looking to some of us that actually have our feet on the ground in the trenches.
Council's Executive Policy Committee is set to discuss the report next week. People in Peguis First Nation are still waiting and watching, preparing for potentially devastating spring flooding again. Runoff is expected soon on nearby rivers in the Interlake. More than 200 homes are at risk in a community that has seen major floods time and time again. Melvin Spence has lived through many of those floods in Peguis and says the damage can last years.
I'm staying in a condemned house. It condemned twice. I got sick too from breathing that mold in. Now I got to take buffers down there. It's bad. It's sickening.
Indigenous Services Canada says it is working with Peguis to find a long-term solution to the chronic flooding. Meanwhile, the Canadian Red Cross says it has crews in Peguis now helping build flood barriers and provide supplies. A 45-year-old woman faces an assault charge after a nurse was punched at the hospital in the paw. RCMP were called to St. Anthony's General Hospital Sunday. Police say the nurse suffered minor injuries. Darlene Jackson heads the Manitoba Nurses Union.
Violence in healthcare is a huge issue. We're seeing nurses yelled at, spit at, having things thrown at them, punched, all the time in this province. And it seems that it's getting more common, but even more frightening is that it's almost like it's accepted now.
The Northern Health Region says it is committed to having safe and respectful facilities. The Canadian Real Estate Association is downgrading its forecast for the housing market. It's projecting fewer home sales and lower prices for 2026, in part because fixed mortgage rates are higher. Sean Cathcart is senior economist with the association.
So our current forecast has a lot of those buyers going back to the sidelines to see if those rates are going to come back down. And until you have a situation like a recession or really massive job losses or something, people are just not going to be inclined to sell for a price that they don't agree to.
The national average home price is now forecast to be just shy of $690,000. That's about $10,000 lower than predicted in January. An increase in retail theft in Brandon is bad for businesses and dangerous for shoppers. That's according to Brandon's Chamber of Commerce. It says Brandon businesses have seen a 40% increase in shoplifting. That's why it wants all levels of government to help fund a public safety unit. The Chamber's Curtis Hulick says shoplifters are more aggressive than ever.
They're seeing weapons, and everyone is getting concerned for the safety of the patrons, the safety of the staff, and the financial impact that this is having on the business community in Brandon.
2 years ago, Brandon police conducted a retail blitz. They recovered more than $10,000 in stolen goods and made 70 arrests. You can find the latest news updated throughout the day. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
That's Heather Wells at your CBC News Desk. Let's check in for one final look at your commute with Sierra Sanders.
Yeah, for sure. It's the highways again, Corey. That's been the theme of the show today. All out west there, we are seeing highways being reported as partially covered and covered with snow. Areas like Fox Warren, Birtle, those areas are being reported. Those highways are being reported as covered as well. Highway number 1 from the Saskatchewan border to Brandon as well. And even looking north as we get to Highway 10 going through Riding Mountain National Park, those areas as well. So keep an eye out on Manitoba 511 for updates on current conditions and any situations going on out there.
Thank you very much, Sierra. Abby, weather?
I'll just tell you, make sure you plan for extra travel time and stay alert on the road while the system passes through. Whether you're dealing with patchy ice in the southern part of the province or those accumulation of snow, we're talking about 2 to 4 centimeters for the Brandon end and about 5 to 10 for the Dauphin end. Just take it easy out there as the systems will definitely be changing quickly throughout the day. We should see it continuing to Friday. So be safe on the road today and even tomorrow.
Thank you very much, Abby. Thanks to the team who put together today's show: Maria Rose Villena, Sofia Peralta Baron, our news team: Heather Wells, Aaron Broman, Alana Cole, and Darren Bernhardt, as well as our wonderful live team: Travis Peterson, who helped get us on the Fast channel today, Abby Adiemi, Darren Morash, Sierra Sanders, as well as Nelly Gonzalez, our show's producer of current affairs, and Leif Larson is our senior producer of audio. I'm Corey Funk, sitting in for Marcy Marcusa. Stay safe out there, stay warm, and enjoy these last couple days of winter before hopefully spring comes. The Current is next.